Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another MHA arc review. I'm Oceans, and I am, as always, joined by my good friend Ian. Hi, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How long did it take us to do this one? We're just at it. We're just pumping these out.
Yeah. I mean, as you told me in the DM, summer of MHA.
Yes, the summer of MHA.
Yeah. Um, we are here to discuss an arc that is very near and dear to Ian, so we will get to that. But before that, Ian, why don't you introduce yourself first to those who are just jumping in?
Hi. So yeah, I'm IanWaffles. I have a channel by the same name and a Twitter account. You can go there to find me posting videos pretty infrequently, but I talk about My Hero Academia sometimes. I've specifically made videos about two characters in this arc, Eri and Overhaul. And I still stand by everything I've said in those videos, even though they're a bit older. So, hey, check those out if you're interested. And then I'm
Mhm.
currently working on an hour-long Kingdom Hearts 2 review, which is the funny thing is I think I've mentioned that I've been working on this video since our first podcast. Eventually it's coming out, I promise. It's in the editing stage. It's just very slow because I am slow. But
The struggle of making kind of big videos.
indeed. But yeah, so we're just here to talk about the Overhaul arc. Spoilers for any MHA for all of MHA as of the timing of this recording. Um,
Yes.
so like if you're coming here thinking we're going arc by arc and then not discussing anything after, not the case. Especially
Nope.
because with this arc in particular, the Overhaul arc. If you've been following the series, I've always pitched this arc as not only my favorite arc in MHA, but I think like it's an arc that where a lot of MHA gets kind of a lot of the big stuff, the really important, like the hearts of the story, kind of gets hurt by later things happening in in current MHA, kind of like the Camino arc with All for One. I've always said that I think this arc still stands up, even if there are problems, or even if future things do harm kind of the lesser elements. However, Ocean's also reread this, and
Hmm.
he has kind of a different opinion. If that's correct, I'll let you speak for yourself on that. Is that correct?
Yes. I read the arc, and while I still enjoy the basic story of it, and I think it pays itself off very well, especially with the arc immediately after, um, I could not help myself reading this and going, man, I hate that I know the future.
Too bad that
Uh,
goes nowhere, or is
yeah,
bad.
exactly. Like, too bad this didn't stay as good as it was. Um, and I
Yeah.
do think that you can read the overall arc and the Culture Festival arc right afterwards, sort of in isolation, and think of it as just like a good quote unquote episode of the MHA story.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you're burdened with the knowledge of the future like we are, there just are certain things in here that evoke nothing but dread in me. Um, and not the good kind, unfortunately.
Yeah. And
Uh,
so the kind of structure of this video will be that we will kind of talk about something that I probably find really positive about the story, and then we will kind of bring up like, okay, that works in a vacuum, but with future context, is this character or this moment or this story subplot ruined in some way, or is it weakened? So that will kind of be
mhm.
the structure going forward. Um, and yeah, is there anything else you want to bring up, Mr. Ocean Man?
Right. Nothing right off the bat. I think we can just get into the topics. Which, what was the first thing you would like to sort of discuss?
Yeah, so this is more of a general talking point, but it's just kind of a this is more of just like an aesthetic appreciation I have for the arc, which is that this whole arc feels like a crossover. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is the way Mirio and Nighteye and Suneater and all these and Overhaul all kind of come into the story. They all feel like they come in like prepackaged as if you were supposed to know them. Like My Hero Academia is like this spin-off of the
Hmm.
Mirio Togata story. This character who has already achieved their dream, and we're kind of like the Robin character looking up to the Mirio, the Batman or whatever.
Hmm.
And what I really like about it is that it plays into a lot of the tropes of I remember watching the Batman the animated series crossover with Superman, where you have like the two heroes contriving a reason for them to fight. The two villains
Hmm.
team up, but because of the writer's appreciation for both of their personalities, they obviously aren't going to stay together. But you have to still kind of figure out, but who would more logically come out on top? You have the kind of aspect of All Might as this connective tissue. You have this kind of
Hmm.
the way Sun Eater and Kirishima, where it's like, let's put some fan favorites in this arc because it's a big spectacle arc, and then just
Hmm.
the way it's so big and all that kind of stuff. Um, really just it gives it this cool vibe of like being a superhero comic, of having these two worlds collide. And I just
Mhm.
really like that vibe about it, of having these two characters, one who's kind of seems like they've had 50 issues, and then one who seems like he's on like his first anniversary special.
Uh-huh.
And it's really cool, and I think it's just another addition to MHA feeling like a superhero story.
Interesting. No, I never thought about it like that, but that's actually very on point. Yeah. If we're sort of going for general sort of praise for the arc, I think that one thing I learned to appreciate even more in this reread is, you know how people talk about like an arc that matures a series, that makes it more like valid, more mature, more sort of directed towards more interesting and maybe more complex topics. I
Hmm.
think the Overhaul arc is a great example of that, because it is a dark arc, but it isn't, filled to the brim with gore and sex. And it isn't, an arc that is oppressively bleak beyond, something that's appropriate for Weekly Shonen Jump. And yet somehow it has that perfect mix of just being different enough from what we've had so far in its focus on drugs and its focus on, the actual process of a police hero joint investigation, on its focus on combat, that it just feels like a big paradigm shift for the series. Not as big as Kamino, because obviously Kamino shook up the entire world of MHA, but this feels like a shakeup for the structure and the topic that MHA is focusing on. You get, a lot of this stuff regarding society, the history about the Yakuza. You get the quirk bullets and the trigger drug, which I will talk about more later because I have a couple thoughts on that. And it just feels like a really good way to sort of lift the series up into a new league, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think the moment where, oh, this will be great. The moment where that really comes together is when Overhaul confronts the League, and he literally just touches a guy and they explode.
Yes.
And that moment, like, we kind of take for granted now that MHA has gotten a lot bloodier and stuff. But that was
Hmm.
like a pretty big deal, and it still really feels very shocking. And this is where I think like the crossover aspect kind of comes in, of like Shigaraki's doing their thing, and then you think it's just kind of going to be a general, and especially since we just had the Twice chapter, which was telling us that we were going to spend more time with these characters. Then you have Big Sis Mag, and she runs in or whatever to fight Overhaul, and you get a little flashback, and you think, oh, okay, so we're you obviously think like, oh, she's gonna get hurt, but then but
Hmm.
she just explodes.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what? And the arc just goes boom, boom, boom. Everything just kicks into overdrive.
Hmm.
And I think that kind of that adds to kind of what you were talking about, of just like it feels like such a contrast, especially since All Might you would think is going to get even just the heroic death, and even he doesn't die. So you're thinking, okay, I guess no one, unless it's in a flashback like Koda's parents, no one's dying in the series. Okay, got it. But then Overhaul comes in and he's like, I'm from the serious comic book. Die. And Shigaraki's like, wait a second. I have decay
I'm
powers and I haven't decayed anyone. And then
I am
he
from
gets
Dark Horse
bodied.
Comics.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, because the thing with Mag is also that it's not just that she dies very horrifically on screen, but it's the fact that she's not a no-name character, even though people pretend she was. She had an established like personality. She had a specific way of like talking, relationships within her team. She wasn't a major character, but she was a named face that you couldn't just, ignore. She was part of the League of Villains. And nowadays people kind of just know her as, oh, the character who dies. But at the time, I remember this was not something people expected, because even she felt quote unquote too important to die, because MHA still felt like a series that had its gloves on, that it would, very much avoid killing off anyone that was too important.
Yeah. And then
And too
Overhaul
important.
took them off and murdered them.
Yeah, literally took off his little plastic gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
go ahead.
no, just what I still want to say is, one thing that I also really like sort of in general about the Overhaul arc is that it is the only arc really so far where we get to see what hero and police joint operations are like, because that realistically is such a huge part of the MHA world that it's kind of crazy we've only really gotten to see it once, but I'm still glad that we did get to see what we saw. You know, the meetings where they're sort of discussing their strategy, and especially the focus Nighteye puts on saying, you know, we're not All Might. We cannot just bust down everyone's doors. We need to be smart about this unless we want to give them another advantage. I always thought that that was something that, again, matured the series. It made it more believable, and it gave it sort of that element of we are doing things properly and reasonably. We're not just superheroes. We are professionals. And I think it's also really good that this happens so close after we've lost All Might. Because, you know, with the disappearance of All Might, we now have to return to these more tactical experiences within the hero world. And yeah, I've just really like it's all encapsulated in fucking Gran Torino, little guy in a cape being like, okay, now we just have to wait for the warrants. I'm like, yes, you have to wait for the warrants. Let's go.
Yeah, and I think what really works about it too is like it adds into that kind of like you have that little section where all the kids really want to do something, they really want to move. But it's like we have to wait for Nighteye to find that one guy so that they can learn their little location with the doll or whatever. You have to, people have to stake out places and go check all these different areas. And even like the meeting, like I think as a contrast to the provisional license where they would have like kind of all this like here's some cool world building stuff. I genuinely wasn't bored during that like entire meeting where they're bouncing around all the characters like, well, Kirishima took a bullet to the head and that was pretty badass and now we have evidence. And then he's like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And then Aizawa's giving kind of more insight into how his erasure quirk works and how that kind of contrasts with what the bullets are. And then you have Night Eye's kind of breakdown to everybody, and then like Rocklock kind of pushing things and talking about the kids. And Rocklock kind of embodies that idea of like the kids being in a place they shouldn't. And I really I really like him, especially just simply because I like that he sticks around for most of the story. And I just kind of like the simple idea of like the idea that he's a hard ass just simply comes from the fact that he's a dad. And he really does care about these kids, but he's just like, well, how do I put it in a way that will make them feel like they need to buzz off? It's too dangerous. It's too scary. You guys shouldn't be here. And there's even a nice moment in the meeting where after all his kind of like show off or standoffishness, when they get to the part where they explain what the drug is actually made of, he's like, this is why I thought the kids shouldn't be in here.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just go ahead. I just think that's a nice moment, or that's a nice feel to the arc. It doesn't feel boring. It feels like it's dark in just the right ways and focuses on the details just enough.
Yeah, and I wanted to specifically add to Lockrock that I just like having different voices and different sort of perspectives from sort of the pro hero crowd in this series. You know, if everyone in the room just accepted the kids were there, I think it would be a less interesting scene, because it also builds up the idea that having kids take place in operations this important and this dangerous is not a completely normal thing, which of course with the later war arcs becomes, a little more tense of a problem. And I like how that is sort of in a small way built up here with Rocklock's sort of exasperation and adversarialness towards the kids being there. And also, we get that a little bit with Aizawa, who is basically ready to pull out the kids from the operation at any given point. And yeah, I just think it's a nice bit of world tension and friction that not everyone just agrees on what to do with the kids. I just think, again, it makes the adults feel like people who have thoughts and opinions that don't always line up with what the plot needs.
Yeah, and I think just to finish up Rocklock, I think what I appreciate is just the fact that his quirk is really dope. Like I really love that. I really love that they specifically did choose him for the operation because they were going up against a quirk where they knew someone could be manipulating things. And so like I love all the scenes where it's like I will lock this area, but Deku, you have to destroy the walls. Like there's actually a genuine amount of like moment to moment teamwork that I think is really really fun. And I just definitely remember really enjoying all that stuff. But yeah, and Rocklock's cool. As far as Aizawa, I think we can talk about him real quick because while he has like an important through line, he kind of, he kind of gets Horikoshi'd where he's just like, crap, he's really overpowered. How do I get rid of him as soon as possible? So we'll talk about that real quick. So I really like the scene where he does encourage Deku and he's like, I know if I try to stop you, you will go anyway, so I will watch you, which is kind of like an
Mhm.
extension of the Ida thing. And also just kind of shows more and more how much of a softie and how much he really does care about these kids are. And I do like that throughout the entire arc, the only times he gets screwed over are when he is protecting Deku. So it
Mhm.
doesn't. So it's not necessarily like he's incompetent. It's just like Deku gets into situations like whenever he notices Nemoto's or Chrono's little, arrow attack, he pushes them
Mhm.
outside of the way so that he can, save Deku or whatever. And ultimately, he's good to be there because he ends up turning off Ares' quirk at the very end. So
Mhm.
I think all that stuff's really good. But but he is at the center of probably one of the stupidest moments in all of MHA. And I
Uh-huh.
don't I don't know if you if yeah, I don't know if you know what I mean. So
No, I
basically,
have no clue
yeah.
actually. What do you mean?
So so when Toga appears, and she's going after Deku, she's coming down with a knife. Okay, Aizawa, what do you do? How do you need to stop her from stabbing your student? Well, she's naked, and Deku's virgin eyes shouldn't be able to see that. So instead, I will use at least like 20 feet of rope to wrap around her torso and her boobs so Deku's poor eyes can't see anything, and not grab her arm, her leg, her other arm, her head.
Uh-huh.
And so then she's like, well, since you gave me a dress, I'll thank you for it. And she uses her free arms and legs to just grab the rope and stab him. It's the dumbest thing ever. And all they
Yeah.
would have had to do to fix it is just have him really quickly throw it and grab like her chest, or just grab her arm. Just use black shading like you do with Mirio when he's naked. Just grab her
Mhm.
arm, and then because he's just he's panicking or whatever, he's like, okay, boom, you only got one chance. You grab her arm, and then she uses her other arm, tosses the knife to the other hand because she's Toga, she's crazy, and then she stabs. No, he built her a dress. It's
Well, I
so
mean,
stupid.
he's Dad Zawa. He is
Yeah,
very invested in the virginity of Deku. Like,
his virgin eyes.
yeah.
You must not see.
The only thing more dangerous than the knife is the allure of a naked woman,
Oh, a
Deku.
naked woman who also says
I,
they want you.
I have never thought of it that way, but yeah, no, that is really stupid.
For years, I've tried to justify it in my head, and I'm like, no, he literally built like if you go back and look at it, he covers he wraps it around everything, but what would be necessary to stop a person from stabbing your student. And so when he gets stabbed for it, and she just easily overpowers him, it's like, yeah, that's what you get, idiot. So I had to bring that up because that's
Mhm.
one of the genuine like moment to moment I'm reading the arc flaws where I'm just like, what is happening?
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. No, but I will say, I mean, I just joked about Dad Zawa protecting Deku's virgin eyes, but I do think Aizawa is often at his best when he's just being a dad to
Yep.
everyone. And so that scene where he's encouraging Deku is maybe one of the best examples of that to me. And it mostly has just to do with like the setup of the scene as well as the art. Just a late night, everyone's worrying, and he just goes up to Deku and he's like, I'm going to take care of you, my little troublemaker. And it's just like this panel of his face all soft, very detailed, and it's just sort of, yeah, man. Yeah, this is a good character. I want
Yeah.
him to be happy.
Yeah,
Too
and I
bad
and
he
I
loses like limbs and shit.
well, and I would say that to go to our kind of like how does this hold up long term? I think Aizawa is one of the few characters in MHA who has pretty much been untouched, because once we get to the war arc, he makes up the fact that he was worthless in Overhaul mostly, where he's like the
Hmm.
linchpin that literally allows Shigaraki to lose because of his body having to store all that damage and not having the healing properties. So it just kind of rubber bands back and snaps him,
Hmm.
which is great. So he literally saved everyone. He looks after his students and stuff, but also just like so basically like that through line of his character has been maintained. And I
Hmm.
think that the tragedy aspect keeps getting compounded onto him. And also, he's just one of the few characters who, when he suffers consequences, it actually sticks. Like
Yeah.
we're in the war arc right now, and he is not looking at Shigaraki or all these people because he needs someone else to do it. Like he's done.
Hmm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, thank goodness.
Yeah, like honestly, my only problem with Aizawa in hindsight is that obviously a lot of sort of his protective sides are informed by his backstory with Shirakumo.
Mhm.
Uh, and I mean, you know what I'm gonna say. The fact that it isn't in the main manga is to this day a huge shame.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. Like, it's just something that's gonna be missing for a lot of anime onlys. Unless the anime decides to adapt the Vigilantes arc randomly, which I can't imagine they
They can
will.
at this point. So,
I mean, it's the anime; they can do whatever,
well,
right? They can
right. Well,
if
and
they.
also, I mean, well, like a thing that being in another manga takes away from is the fact that when he says, "I'm going to look after you, troublemaker," if you have the context of Shirakumo, you know that he's looking at another Shirakumo. You know,
Mhm.
like that whole idea, and that's an extra layer to it that you're mostly not going to get if you just
Yeah,
read the main book.
yeah. I mean, again, the anime can technically do anything. I mean, if they decide that Twice just isn't dying, they will do that.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, it is a huge shame because I think Aizawa is one of the few characters that still holds up almost perfectly in the current manga
yeah,
for what he is. And really, the only problem I have with him is the fact that the big thing about him, the big piece of characterization that informs all of what he does, basically doesn't exist if you only read the main story. Um, which, yeah, that just sucks. But I agree that as far as overhaul stuff is concerned, in regards to the future, he's still perfectly fine. I never looked at him while reading this arc and thought, "Oh God, how the mighty have fallen."
especially since he kind of falls in this arc. So it's like, oh, the mighty were avenged.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. And since we're already talking about kind of like moments that for me are just like stand out, like, all right, that's a flaw. We'll just
Hmm.
rapid fire through these. So the first one is like I think the obvious one people come up to, which is the girls do nothing. Um,
Yeah.
so to me, this is as much of a flaw as it is on its face, which is that
Hmm.
you go into the arc and you say, "Hey, do you like Suyu and Nochako?" Yes, I do, Horikoshi. Would you like them to do things? Anything really? Yes, I do. I would, Horikoshi. No. Oh, well, that doesn't feel good. But
Yeah.
I think that's a lot better. And that it's more easily for me, like I just ignore it while I'm reading, that because they're literally invisible, than
Hmm.
if it was something like Kirishima, where you have Kirishima get a setup story in the start, and then you're like, okay, it's Kirishima time, and then let's say we just cut his Rappa fight.
Yeah.
That would be way worse because then the story gives you expectations of like a character journey and a character story, and then just kind of gets rid of it. Whereas this, all I was promised is, hey, do you like these characters and would you like to see them literally do anything? Fuck you, no. And, like,
Hmm.
and it's like, okay, well, unfortunate.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I mean, I do think it's Hori has this bad tendency of having character constellations that ultimately mislead you into thinking that they're all going to do something. Um, which is a shame because you look at something like the Stain arc, where you did have a fairly unusual character constellation, and they all did something.
Yeah.
Ida, Deku, and Todoroki, they were all important. So then, when you have other groups like you have here with the girls and Kirishima and Deku, and one side of that equation does a lot, basically everything, and the other side vanishes essentially halfway through the arc. Yeah, no, I mean, I get that it isn't something that we were meant to expect based on like build up, but the fact that they're there is kind of build up by itself, in my opinion.
Oh, what I mean is that it's not it could have been worse, I guess is what I
Yes,
mean.
yes, I agree with that.
Yeah. That's more what I mean. It's like the damage done is as much as you saying it, which is the
Yeah,
girls did nothing. Doesn't that suck?
yeah.
Rather than a whole character arc getting shafted.
No, it's like it's nothing being ruined; it's opportunities being missed,
Yeah,
basically.
which is unfortunate, and yeah,
Hmm.
it's a problem for it. This
Hmm.
one's really quick. The Nighteye tickle machine. I don't, and it just I guess Bubble Girl as a whole, just I don't know how her top doesn't fly off anytime she moves anywhere.
I mean, I don't know what Hori was thinking with anything regarding that, but you know,
Yeah,
uh, sometimes our man, he's just a little weird.
it's the writer's poorly disguised fetish.
Yes.
That meme. Yeah,
Well, no,
this is
that's
totally character driven and not the writer's poorly disguised fetish.
actually, I would say that's more so Mirko and Stars and Stripes, if anything.
Yeah. More stars and stripes just because of how just instantly she's thrown in. At least people get to think Mirko's cool.
Yeah, I mean that's true, but God, yeah, Hori went crazy with Mirko.
Yeah.
Uh,
He
I
was
mean, do you,
training how to draw muscles with All Might and Mirio, and then he's like, "All right, now add the boobs."
God, do you follow Noguchi-san on Twitter?
You've told me about this, where he just draws Mirko all the time.
Yes, yes. Literally, all he draws is either Kid Deku and Kid Bakugo being cute, or Mirko like wearing like an incredibly sexy dress from like a real life rapper or artist.
That's amazing. The two sides
Yeah,
of man.
yeah. No, he
Wholesome
no.
father and horny daddy.
Noguchi's actually also he's credited in the volumes for the Overhaul arc as well, and I think it's him who on one page where they get to design their own heroes, his hero is just called Hater.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah. But yeah, no. The tickle machine is weird. That's where we were. The tickle machine is definitely very weird.
Yeah, and it's a lot weirder in the anime because in the manga, since you can just have characters talking and there be white space behind them, you don't forget about it, but it's not constantly like ruining a moment. I think she's in like 5 panels and then she's out of it. But in the anime, it's way worse because obviously you have to draw everything. So like when characters are talking, she's just right there strapped to a wall, and it's just like, yeah, woo.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where like it's kind of the introduction to Nighteye, save for a little scene before that.
Yeah.
And it's just turned into a gag that is not funny as much as it is just kind of weird and creepy. And it instantly gives Nighteye worse vibes than he honestly deserved.
Yeah, especially with how he turns out is a pretty great character, at least as far as I'm concerned. But and I think the way you could have fixed it is just because I like the actual like the intended punchline. I do find funny, which is that when you walk in the room and he has like his hands out like he's in like a battle pose, and then he just looks left, and it's like yes. This is my serious office environment. And I'm like, I think you could have just fixed it if it wasn't like looking like a literal torture machine, just by just having be like, you know what this means, Bubble Girl. Like if you have to do the joke, you know what this means, Bubble Girl, blah, blah, blah. And then she just comes in and he just has like a feather duster and he's just like moving it across her face like, ha, 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 ha. Like it'd still be weird, but it would be less fetishy. And it would be absurdism, of just like, what is this place?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, but I also think Bubble Girl's design really doesn't help.
Oh, no.
In that sense, yeah. I don't know, just something like they come in and he's forcing her to read like stand-up comedy jokes.
Yeah, okay,
or something like that.
That would have been the perfect fix for it if we're gonna completely just remove the feather stuff. We just make it to be like, no, say it again, but with feeling. Knock knock. Who's there?
Like a drill instructor. Yeah, that would have been great. Yeah.
And then Mirio could say like a punchline because he's a silly boy, and it's like, it's us, we're here.
Yeah, but yeah, no, that's just a case of Hori being extremely weird for basically no reason. So do you have any other flaws?
And then
since
the final
we've harped on this a little.
Yeah, the final big flaw, and because this will kind of bring us back to the beginning and kind of go through the whole arc. Shigaraki. The poor boy. Everything he does in this whole arc, you're just looking at like, he doesn't know. Who's gonna tell him? Who's gonna tell him that none of it means anything?
Yeah.
Who's gonna tell him that his personal growth was all a part of the machinations of a man in a suit? Who's gonna tell him that his friendship philosophy, I guess, weren't his true friends, and he's just gonna remember his dog, I guess. Who's gonna tell him the just literally anything he does doesn't the quirk bullets are just gonna get taken away from him and given to his asshole dad? Who's gonna tell him? So,
yeah.
And it's the big just like, no.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? Because Mirio and Eri, who are also characters I would put into the sort of a similar category with Shigaraki, they at least have very cool shit that they get to do in this arc that is sort of self-contained. With Shigaraki, a lot of the cool stuff he gets to do in this arc kind of hinges on the promise of, oh, he will now be like a huge threat. Especially if you think about the last scene on the highway, which self-contained is a wonderful, cool scene. One of my favorite scenes in the manga, I think.
Or that
But
his
with the look of,
relationships will go anywhere.
yeah, exactly. But sort of with the look into the future, yeah, what the hell was he cooking?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, right? So because the series isn't over. So let's say we, it's been a billion chapters, but whatever. Eventually he remembers that Twice is dead. And he's like, boo-hoo, that makes me sad. I'm
Hmm.
trying to think of any way that that could justify how much time there's been in between and just how much, like, at this point it doesn't even seem like Hori. Like, here's what I'm always wondering about My Villain Academia and Shigaraki and the league dynamic, which we won't go too in depth on NBA itself, but just like, did he not know that we would get invested in them? Did he think that when Shigaraki says these things that he actually is lying? Like, it's actually supposed to be that he's learned how to be a better manipulator, full stop, and not of like
Hmm.
when he says I trust you, he means it. Because none of that's come back. So
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about this before, I'm pretty sure, but I think it's really just genuinely a case of it being lost in the stream, sort of the stream of consciousness writing that Hori has been doing for the past year, where it's just sort of, okay, let's just move forward, let's do whatever. All for one, he's the big threat now. Like, just this need to move forward at all costs has sort of just drowned out many of the things he's built up. Because if Horikoshi genuinely wrote Shigaraki's arc up to and including the war, thinking that what we were going to get out of it was that he's a lying manipulator that we shouldn't like, I'm surprised he got this far with writing a story, to be honest.
yeah, then it's like,
If
well,
that,
death of the author.
yeah, like if that was genuinely the way he saw it, I wouldn't even know. I don't know how I would deal with that, because that's so incongruous with what he wrote. Like, even if you look at the scene sort of now in Overhaul, like the scene where he tells Toga and Twice that they're doing it for the league, for their friends. That scene has no like devious energy whatsoever. So either Hori would be lying to himself, or he's just incredibly oblivious.
Well, and the symbolism of taking off the hand and the gentle expression, like
Yeah.
like just things like that. If you just wanted it to be the I believe in you. But yeah, no, it's like it really has been in the back of my mind of like, did he, like, when he says like, oh, you're gonna pay for messing with someone's feelings, was he literally just saying, oh, that's dope for us because you pissed off Twice, we're gonna kill you, and that's really handy.
Mhm. No, Ian, my silly boy, don't you see? Shigaraki was such a good manipulator that he manipulated us into liking him.
That's true.
That was the point.
Let's go.
Uh,
Or a goat she. Let's go.
oh, God. Let him cook.
Let him cook.
Let him cook. It only gives you food poisoning.
But yeah, no, yeah, it's unfortunate. I couldn't read any scene with Shigaraki, at least when he was doing things, and other than just being like, oh, this is really nice art. Like, that was all I could really give it, because I'm just looking at it and I'm like, buddy, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. You're screwed.
Yeah.
It won't lead to anything. Your dad literally told you that apparently all this growth that he let you be alone for, it doesn't matter. He just wants your body, bro. It's unfortunate.
He was just being silly and a little goofy.
Was just being silly and goofy.
Yeah.
I'm gosh, I don't know what to tell you.
I actually have one more flaw to throw at you.
Yeah, go for it.
Toga's use for Deku's blood.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
just kind of like the long term of the setup and payoff for that.
Yeah, you make such a big deal out of the fact that she's gotten her blood, because his blood, because it's not just that it's a dramatic panel of her saying, oh, I got his blood, is that we get that panel right after revealing what her power is. Yeah. So that's immediately setting up that, oh God, this is going to be a massive problem because she can impersonate Deku. And then the resolution to that is, I mean, it's not dumb, it's a useful use of it, but it's so lame. It's so incredibly lame. It's like, oh, I have the power to impersonate the main character. What will I do? I will trick his friends to help him.
Yeah, and I used to like that a lot because I thought because of I mean just think of I mean the idea of the villains eventually being able to grow and come out on top. So I thought I liked the idea of like we were going to use this against the heroes probably in their heads, but then they're like,
Hmm.
nah, but we hate Overhaul more. And so doing that gives them the quirk bullets, gives them more power, gives them all these things. And so I kind of liked it as a subversion in the sense of like it's leading to kind of just like helping themselves basically.
Hmm.
And I liked it from that angle. But again, since literally none of that matters, it's just a tiny little addition to the arc, and it's like, oh well, yeah, I
Hmm.
guess that's that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really isn't a huge problem. It's just another one of those things where it's sort of like, really, that's the best thing you could have done with this.
Yeah,
And yeah, so that's just something that sort of sparked again when I reread it. I was
yeah.
like, oof.
Mhm. There's another thing that's set up. It's not a big deal, but it's just kind of like you can tell Hori was like, I don't know where to put this, or he forgot or something. Which is that at the start of the raid, Fat Gum is like, here, Suneater, please eat this swordfish with a sword. That could be cool in a fight later. And then and then Horikoshi forgets about it, and then he's like, shit, where do I put the swordfish? And he just has it be when Suneater breaks in and saves Aizawa, and it's like instead of a tentacle wrapping his hand, a sword hand. And that's it. That's all he does with it. So,
Yeah, I actually had noticed that, but you're right. Jeez. But okay, do we have any other like small flaws, or is that?
I think that's it. For those types of things. Unfortunately, yeah. So Shigaraki's kind of done. I guess since we're already talking about him, we could just talk about the. I mean, should we just kind of throw in all our complaints with Shigaraki at the league's involvement in general in this arc?
Sure.
I mean, I like their banter. I like Toga and Twice's interactions, but the
Hmm.
reason that still kind of hurts is is because Twice's death has yet to have its ultimate culmination. So,
Hmm.
so I mean, maybe that'll come back. We know that Toga has his blood, so maybe that will be kind of paid off later and more enjoyable. But
Hmm.
I mean, on its own, their banter's fun. I think Toga and Twice basically they come across better than Shigaraki because they're still going to get kind of cooler moments later. And two, they're just kind of the whole point is just for them to kind of be zany and wacky and have fun and screw everybody over. And I do actually
Hmm.
like how they I don't know if this was intentional, but whenever they're trying to trick the wall guy into like kind of overdoing it so they can find them and they're in the room with Deku and Nighteye and stuff because they can't find him. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know if this is intentional or if it was something else, but there's the part where they're talking in the room, and I can assume that Deku and them can hear them because they're like, because Toga's like, someone so small is a blah blah blah, and so short tempered and X Y Z. And it's like, oh, they're always looking down on you. And then he screams, and then Deku looks up, and he's like, oh, that's where he is. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really clever. I don't know if that's a, I don't know if I don't know if that's the English dialogue helping it, or if it was simply to be make him mad, he'll scream, and then Deku will know where it is. But they mention how it's so echoey they can't find him because he's already screaming throughout the thing. So I really do think it is like a clever little wordplay of her talking in the room and being like, "Oh, they're always looking down on others," and then Deku
Hmm.
gets him. That kind of little minutia I noticed throughout the arc as being just like really fun. Like those kind of tiny little details of how they interact with everyone's quirks. The one I especially like is Shigaraki not giving them direct orders to betray anyone. So when Overhaul
Hmm.
making a smart decision is like, has Shigaraki told you to betray me? Does he have any plans for that? And they go, no. And it's because his plan was, I trust you guys will do what you think is best. Wink.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I know
um,
that's always kind of cool when you have like interrogation powers in any series, and they find like a clever way to go around it. Even though this time it's like completely unintentional as well.
Which is what I think makes it better, which is the
Yes.
idea of, like, he just really genuinely did trust them,
Hmm.
allegedly,
Yeah.
and they did what needed to be done, and I thought yeah, I thought so basically, I thought that whole section because I think it gets downplayed a lot with the wall guy, I think that whole section's really fun, especially for those characters, and especially kind of the way they do these clever things that kind of mix with the powers. I really like all that, so
Hmm.
But yeah, so okay, let's see what's next. So now we can go to I think some more big picture stuff. So let's talk about Kirishima. Um, so Kirishima in this arc, he what I really like about it is just kind of how it kind of goes back to the rotation mentality of the series, where it's like, well, we lost
Mm-hmm.
Bakugo, we lost Todoroki because they're grounded.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, we're going to grab Kirishima, a fan favorite character at that point, and still a fan favorite
Mm-hmm.
character, but a character
Mm-hmm.
who hadn't gotten much outside of just kind of being Bakugo's buddy and having potential. And so I
Mm-hmm.
really love how full force this arc goes in with just being like Kirishima is badass. and
Yes.
they give him all these amazing shots and panels. I love when he gets hit by the knives and there's this panel of him falling back and then you flip the page and then he's just boom in battle mode. So it feels like he snaps into place like no. Um
Mm-hmm.
and it's just all of Kirishima's stuff is just either really cool or just makes him a fully fleshed character in a way that ties into the themes of who you look up to as a hero. It's nice that someone who doesn't just look up to All Might. The way
Mm-hmm.
it ties into Fat Gum, the way he just gets brutalized. Like in the anime, they tone it down completely, but in the manga, he loses like all the flesh on his skin. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, go ahead. I'm just kind of gushing at this point, so I'll let you go
Mm-hmm.
jump in if you have a specific point.
Well, about Kirishima, the one thing that I've always found just so impressive about him in Overhaul is how efficiently and how quickly Hori turns him from a side character, like not even a B-lister, like a D-lister,
Yeah,
into someone who could genuinely just stick around in the main cast.
yeah,
Like, Kirishima has, honest to God, 3 scenes in Overhaul. Beyond that, he's mostly in the background.
hmm
But those 3 scenes are so like hyper focused on giving him everything a good character in a shonen manga needs that he just catapults. And it's something that I've always found so genuinely impressive. And it's always built that excitement in MHA, at least for a long time, that this could happen to any character.
yeah,
Anyone could just suddenly become important and get, a cool backstory, a wonderful power up, and just something that ties in with already pre-established characteristics. Because the thing is, it's not like Kirishima just changes randomly into a cooler character. The story and the overall arc take things that we've already seen about him and just amplifies them into full-fledged main character territory. The fact that he's insecure about only having a hardening quirk is something that is established in USJ all the
yep,
way back. And it's something that just gave this series this feeling of, oh my God, all of Class A is just rotating and they could become this cool. And of course, when you have a cast like Class A, so large with so many different powers, that means that 90% chance it was that your character might have become important. If you were like me, a big Denki Kaminari fan, and you saw what Hori did for Kirishima, you were like, oh shit, Kaminari had like this scene in license exam. It's gonna come back. He's gonna be the actual main character.
yeah,
Paraphrasing.
yeah.
and
He's gonna get his main character moment.
yeah, exactly. And it all started really with Kirishima. And sadly, it kind of stayed with Kirishima,
Oh,
honestly.
I'd argue Jiro's the other one.
Yes, but even there, I would say not to this extent.
Oh, not to this extent, but it follows the framework. You get
Yes.
a personal reason, which we'll talk about that when we get to Culture Festival. But you get like a personal motivation with the parents. You get actually like a big deal moment with the idea of like heroism through singing and all these types of things. You get a lot of moments with her throughout. You get a lot of focus. But yeah, I would say she's kind of the last of that kind of rotation device really working.
Hmm.
Because then it just becomes kind of moments for people. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And then I think the other thing with Jiro that's sours it a bit for me is the fact that Kirishima gets more moments after this point, after his big focus time, and they're all good. Jiro gets one moment after her big focus time, really,
Yeah,
and that's
it's one of
her
the
against.
worst.
Yeah, it's one of the worst things in the manga. So I think I'm less accepting of Jiro just because, sure, she rotated into the spotlight and she got built up a little, but it didn't lead to any good moments with her later down the line. Whereas Kirishima, he has his scaling of Gigantomachia, which is a really cool moment that plays off of what is established here.
Yeah, and I would say Kirishima, because he's gonna definitely get a fight that's been set up, I think, in the war arc. So he's gonna get probably like one last really cool moment. I think Kirishima is also a character who in hindsight doesn't really get hurt because he's kind of in a Tokoyami territory of like you just kind of want to see him, and where Tokoyami you just want him to be cool and he continuously
Hmm.
does cool things. Kirishima you just want to see him be a good boy, and he continues to do that in really spectacular ways. You
Hmm.
just kind of needed this as a base work to throw, to build off of, um,
Hmm.
which is really good. I really like everything that ties into Mina, and the way that her kind of character kind of gets sucked into his little story and kind of inspires him. Like just his whole little backstory of all the stuff he's doing, like the moment where just the idea of like what manliness means and how he kind of comes up with a positive masculinity, which I really love. I love in stories where you do have a character who looks at like manliness or like what it means, like I'm going to be a man, but then they actually
Hmm.
like take it into a really good direction. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just because I think oftentimes, especially with that subject of like being a man or being masculine, it can be taken as like just like in the most pure, simple form of like the archaic version of it, where it's
Yeah.
like be
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
be that. But I actually like kind of I don't know if this is the right word for it, but it kind of feels like there are a lot of these stories that are kind of reclaiming being a man as like a positive thing because they're showing
Yeah.
what does that mean. It's a personal thing and it can involve vulnerability through strength. So
Hmm. Yeah. No.
being being
I.
the wall for other
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely think, I mean, I've been of the opinion and I've been booed for this opinion that MHA does really well at sort of, as you said, at reclaiming masculinity through characters like Deku and through characters like Kirishima. Which also, I mean, if you there's a whole discussion here, right? Because you can also contrast that with Bakugo and Endeavor, for example, to sort of show how ideals of strength tied to masculinity are often harmful if you do not also temper them with vulnerability, as you said. And to sort of bring it
Or
back down, I do think Kirishima is a really good example of that because, yeah, he talks about being manly, he talks about taking charge, but it's never in like an adversarial context. It's always I'm excited to help people. I'm excited to be the wall. I'm excited to be the rock in the storm. Um, and yeah, I think that is a very, very positive aspect of My Hero as a series in general.
yeah, and I think that yeah, so I think just as far as Kirishima goes, I just think he's a great addition to this arc. He kind of feels like fan service in a way. Like he's what I talked about with the crossover idea of like he was a fan favorite character even before he was this well liked because it's My Hero, fan favorite characters for everybody basically. But he had
Mhm.
his dynamic with Bakugo, so people latched onto him a lot more. And so it kind of just felt like, well, we can't use Bakugo and Todoroki for this arc. Kirishima, you are now
Mhm.
in their position. And he's like, what? And then he rises to the occasion.
Uh-huh.
And it's great. I love his dynamic with Fat Gum. Fat Gum's a great character.
Mhm.
And just as far as like the main thing I love about MHA of like what does it mean to be a hero and then learning what those characters mean or what they believe that is, I just definitely love the idea of he is a wall that won't fall and that kind of contrast with or not contrast that being built up in the scene where he's trying to bum rush the knife guy and then he
Mhm.
actually thinks back to his relationship with Bakugo and Bakugo being like, nah, what's really cool is like when you get hit and you don't fall down. And I like that he
Mhm.
takes that upon himself and gets his maximum hardness mode or whatever. Um, and it's just great. Like all his stuff is great. So it's
Mhm.
great in the anime too. Kirishima good.
Yeah, actually, speaking of the anime, I prefer the way the flashbacks are placed in the anime because the placement's different for them.
Yeah, it's a bit different. Yeah, they kind of yeah. I mean, you explain if you remember more
Yeah.
specifics.
So the big flashback, the one where you have, him with his quirk and him with Crimson Riot and Mina, in the manga, that flashback happens between him being brutalized after he protected Fat Gum and Fat Gum launching his punch, which leads
Oh
to Fat
yes,
yeah, which
yeah.
leads to Fat Gum holding the punch for about 2 chapters, which is a little awkward. Whereas in the manga, in the anime, what happens is he has that flashback while he's watching Fat Gum protect him, and then the end of the flashback ties into Kirishima standing up and fighting Rappa, which is a way better flow of action, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the Bakugo flashback is also slightly earlier in the anime, but I cannot confirm that. It's just I think it is slightly earlier, but I'm not sure.
The anime also does a great job of once he defeats the knife guy, they actually establish his connection to Mina earlier. Like they actually have
Mhm.
like a little moment where he's like, why was I scared to move? And then you see Mina running. And so like it actually
Mhm.
sets it up even earlier, which is really nice. That kind of ties it together a lot more. Um,
Mhm.
I actually think I prefer the manga's pacing for the flashback placement because what I like about it is that you have the big moment and then you really do build up this idea of him being scared, but then he comes in and so you think like, oh, okay, so he's doing his big hero thing. And I like that it punctuates with like so it kind of feels rushed in the moment, in a good way, I think, where it's like, oh yeah, Kirishima, let's go, 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 go. And then when he's falling back and they're like, okay, this was his big master plan, because we've already set up through the story before this with in the alleyway that because they skip the little Mina flash or they don't include the little Mina flashback the anime adds, it's less about fear and more about that he is strong and he has become really strong and cool. So whenever he's really strong and cool and comes in and takes all those punches, you're just like, yeah, Kirishima's just doing what I would expect of him. And so I kind of like that when he's falling back and they go, oh, that was his big master plan. And you go, let's go, Kirishima. It goes, that's not it at all. I was just
Mhm.
scared again. And then you're like,
Mhm.
what? And then you get to learn the flashback. So
Mhm.
actually, I do prefer that pacing, but I think the anime's pacing is still very good. Um,
Yeah, because for me the thing is just that in the manga, because the thing is the way his flashback starts, right above it you have Fat Gum charging his punch, and then the moment the flashback ends 2 chapters later, he's still charging that punch. So to me, it's just kind of weird where it's like, okay, Fat Gum, hold your hand, hold your fist. I have to learn about Kirishima real quick. Whereas just in terms of flow, it felt more natural to have Kirishima have that flashback while Fat Gum is just being pummeled, because that's sort of not something that needs immediate release. Whereas a punch, I feel like I want that to come more sort of, snappy by comparison. But
yeah,
I also totally get sort of what you were saying with, I think both versions are great, basically.
yeah. And I think my final point on it would be I think the difference for me is in manga, I'm more allowing for things being in stasis between panels because of the way
Mm-hmm.
like characters will have like 10-minute dialogue sequences in their heads and then like nothing's happened between panels because that's just kind of how it works. Each one's like a moment in time and you can kind of insinuate whatever. So to me, I just
Mm-hmm.
thought I felt the idea of like time freezing. This is information for me and then you're building up the punch. Whereas I do think in the anime, it was a great change because in anime, things are moving. And so, and this is where a lot of MHA has a problem is they don't end up animating them doing anything else. They're just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like talking, like most of the time, they'll just be like saying all the dialogue. It's like, guys, why aren't you moving? Move,
Mm-hmm.
guys, move. A big example of this, so we can move off Kirishima and go to Suneater. A big example of this in the anime that's hilarious is when the big brute guy is walking up to Suneater and he gives his backstory, and they're not like flashing back or anything. He's just like, I'm a big brute guy. You cannot cut through me because I am trash. Trash is really cool, blah, 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 blah. And he's saying all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and Suneater's just standing there. It's like Suneater, dodge. Suneater, move to the left. Suneater, he's not even attacking you. And so when he then winds up his big punch, and then he goes, it's like Suneater, why didn't you move? And it's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
awkward. It's terrible pacing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
which is and it's also funny too because they could have easily fixed it by just doing what anime does when they need to get through this slow motion because
Yeah.
in the manga what they do and it's really clever, it flows really well, is that he makes his big shield and then that guy takes the shell off his body, whereas in like the anime it kind of like teleports to his hand, but in the manga it's kind of like he's stealing it from him, like it warps to him basically, and so it causes his shoulder to pivot and he starts to
Mm-hmm.
fall, and then that guy comes in with the follow through.
Uh-huh.
Whereas in the anime, he just takes it off. He's like, "Oh no, my barrier!" And then the guy's like, "Let me tell you stuff." And he's like, "Whoa, this guy's really interesting to listen to. I should probably." Oh, he's
Uh-huh.
hitting me.
Yeah, I mean the anime is really inconsistent when it comes to anything really, but especially sort of flow of action. And we will certainly get to that this episode as well.
Oh yeah.
Um,
But as far as Sun Eater, I would just say that he's kind of like Kirishima, where he feels like he was the fan favorite of the Mirio comic book series. So
mhm.
he gets a lot of love. I love his personality. I love the cleverness in his fight of like the little panels of him like eating the crystal and like doing all this really cool stuff and like the giant chicken leg and like every time I look at that spread where he kicks them into the wall, it looks almost like, I've never had this in like anything in manga. It looks almost 3D, or
Mm-hmm.
like it looks like he's kicking into the like he's kicking out of the manga and he's stretching my book. Like it's really weird. But I really like Suneater. I really like the fight, and I just think that everything about his character is just so like just like clever, of just the idea of like, I'm Suneater, so he eats things, but I eat the sun, and the sun is Mirio, who I look up to, but that's what means I'm stronger because I gain my power from him, but I'm weak, but because he's my friend, I'm this, and blah 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 blah. I'm a badass. Like, oh, like, it was just like he has one of the coolest hero names ever. Like it just so thoroughly ties into his
Yes.
character. I love him so much.
Yes, I definitely agree, especially with the hero name. I think explaining their hero names is sometimes a little hit or miss in MHA, but Suneater absolutely hits. Um, I also really like right at the start when he's introduced in this arc, um, they kind of play on the fact that you are supposed to think he's impressive from the beginning, because he's part of the big three. He looks like Sasuke Uchiha. He's sort of gloomy, and so the first thing he does, he glares at them. They're like, "Oh my god, this energy!" And then he's just the
Potatoes.
biggest. Yeah, he's the little kitten of the group, the heart of a flea. And I like it. It feels aware of like what that character design sort of implies in the context of Battle Shonen, and it feels very tongue-in-cheek and fun because of that. And I like how it doesn't end at the gag. We get like the scene with him against the Yakuza, and we get the scene of him talking about his relationship to Mirio and how he used his own power. And funnily enough, Suneater is actually a character that has gotten more things very recently, and they're still good. Like,
Yeah.
I think the recent Suneater stuff we got in the manga was actually very, very good, and I did not feel anything weird while I was rereading these sections in the overall arc.
Yeah, they really yeah, and okay, so what's interesting too is I think like with these characters, they're obviously kind of fulfilling that role of you go on ahead, I'll face him.
Mm-hmm.
And what I kind of like about both Kirishima and Suneater's is that they're like Kirishima's especially works because his whole thing is like I saw Aizawa was going to get hit, and so I just kind of jumped too. I didn't know what was going on. Which is really cool because it's the idea of like running, that feeling of moving your body moving, and that ties into Deku
Yes,
and his
yes.
backstory, all that really good stuff. Kirishima's backstory is great. We can't talk about all of it because we need to hit a lot of things, but he's great. But
Mhm.
Suneater, I like that his is a little selfish in a way, where his is
Mhm.
like, if I don't step up now, like we're just going to be wasting time with all of you people here. I know I can do this. But it's like, you really should just let someone else help you. But he's like, no, I have to do it because Mirio needs to, everyone needs to be there to back up Mirio. And I think what really works about it is that later, whenever Mirio loses his quirk, they do the shonen or just kind of like a anime thing of like Suneater can sense it and he wakes up.
Mhm.
And I kind of like the idea of like tying that back together to when Deku comes in and saves Mirio at the last second, because it kind of
Mhm.
reminds you of like, oh yeah, Suneater sent them ahead so that they could rescue his friend. And so it kind of wraps back around of like, he really did buy them time, because every kind of minute counts, especially in the Mirio fight where we're literally counting minutes and things. So I just like how much he legitimately aided the minutia, even if it's small, of the raid. And I think that's just a general thing I like about the raid is that you really do buy, even with the girls, that every little thing that someone is doing is kind of like very tightly knit together. It never really feels like, well, we probably could have skipped this, and
Mhm.
or and not in like a writing sense, but like in universe, it's like, oh, we probably could have spent more time here and still accomplish what we needed to later,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
and I just really like that. So
Yeah, no, I think I agree. Like, I think a lot of like these, especially sort of this, how do we even say, like this earlier section of the overall. It's weird calling it the earlier section because I mean it's sort of already in the meat of things. But everything before Deku versus Overhaul basically has a lot of these moments that just set up really cool concepts, really cool characters that you wouldn't have expected to become so major. And we have Kirishima, we have Suneater, we have Mirio, who are all characters that when the arc started, because I was there, people were sort of like, oh yeah, they might be pretty cool. but I think no one expected them to become this impactful and this cool within their own arc. And it's also something I appreciate about the overall arc, that it's almost like this sequence of here's a cool thing, here's a cool thing, here's a cool thing, and here's the big fight with Deku, right? Like I always thought that that was like a nice through line.
A lot of
basically.
momentum. Yeah.
Yes.
And also I think that what these fights do really well, that maybe it's just recency instead of, I guess, bias, hatred. But I feel like what I really like is that the connective through line of a lot of My Hero Academia, and this will be something that'll be interesting to look back on. But the through line of what I bought into the series was, what does it mean to be a hero? And I like that Kirishima, Suneater, Mirio, Deku, every single character in this arc who gets a lot of spotlight gets to learn that lesson. And so it's always adding to that theme of just what does it mean to be a hero for these characters? Because if you're gonna have all this stuff, then you want these characters to mean something past being a fight. So actually, this will be a good comparison. So obviously, Sasuke retrieval, everyone kind of gets a big fight. And you rewatched it recently, so you can push back on this or not. But to me, I always felt like those fights were great, but they always felt like all they added to was, well, I'm glad I got to like Neji one more time, or I'm glad I got to see Choji get a cool moment, and then that's kind of like the end of it, and then you want more cool moments, but you don't really get them. Whereas what I feel about Kirishima and Suneater's stuff is that it all ties into an overarching theme of not just an arc, but the series. So now anytime you have a conversation with someone about, oh, MHA has the theme of what does it mean to be a hero? You can go, oh, but I love the way Kirishima explores that in his very specific way. I love the way Suneater explores that in his very specific way. So they kind of have lasting impact in that sense, past just, well, I'm glad Kirishima got to do something cool, and I'm glad I got to like him a little more. I hope I get to like and see him do more cool things if they allow it. And that's not a knock on the Naruto thing, but just more of like, is that difference like a good comparison, or would you say there is kind of a through line?
I think it's a good comparison for some of the fights in Sasuke Retrieval. Like, for example, definitely for Kiba and maybe Neji's fight, I would say that sticks. But for example, Choji, his fight in Sasuke Retrieval does have a very specific goal, which is to sort of show what the ninja community means to him and to people like him. Because the whole thing of Sasuke Retrieval, right, is that we don't like Sasuke. Like, besides Naruto, they don't like him, but they're still gonna save him because being a community, being a village of warriors means that they need to stick together in hard times and in the easy times. And Choji, you explore that sort of through the lens of, as a kid, he had real trouble sort of integrating into that community, but all it took was a single person and he just became part of it. And now, he wants to extend the chance to remain a part of it to someone whom he doesn't really connect to at all, Sasuke. It's sort of, and Shikamaru does sort of the same thing, although his fight is dragged down by the fact that it's fucking terrible and boring.
Well, I didn't bring up his because I did think, like, I'm like, well, his whole character arc is the whole series. Like, he's not one of the characters who gets left behind.
Yes.
So, but yeah, and the comparison again was not meant to downplay Naruto, of just more is that I mean, just more for the audience, but also just like the idea of like, so Choji would be kind of similar to what I'm talking about here.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
When you think of Naruto and you think of like the ninja society aspect, you can then go, oh man, remember when Choji went out of his way to fight for Sasuke, XYZ, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, actually, the best sort of example of that, if you want it from the Sasuke Retrieval arc, is before the fights even start with Shikamaru, because he straight up just says, I really don't like Sasuke, but he's our comrade. He's someone from our village. We will save them because that's what it means to be a ninja to me and to you, supposedly. And yeah, like, I do think the comparison works with some of the fights. Like the Kiba fight is basically just a fight. Neji has a little bit, if I remember correctly, of like him going, oh, Naruto, you showed me what it means to really be the dancing queen or whatever. But he's still like, Neji's also very much sort of just a cool fight. But Choji and Shikamaru, I would say, is very much sort of a does what you're saying MHA does as well. And even Lee and Gaara versus Kimimaro also have that energy where it's sort of like how does the concept of like abandonment, which is such a common thing in a war-torn ninja land, interact with the idea of community, and what does it do to people? So yeah, no, I get the comparison, but I do think Sasuke retrieval, like a lot of Naruto, is just inconsistent in it, you know.
Yeah, and so but regardless, I think that is just a great thing that I really enjoy about this arc. Long story short, Suneater and Kirishima good.
Yes,
The only
Suneater and Kirishima very good.
The only thing like Kirishima could possibly like, I mean, it's probably not going to happen at this point, but I'm fully expecting at the end of the series in the epilogue, Kirishima's walking around and he's like, I'm Red Riot, and then someone goes, Red Riot, that sounds like a man's name, and then he turns around and there's Rappa, and then they have a fight.
That would actually be really funny and also really cool.
Because they set up here like, you know, next time we'll have a real duel. So that was always something that people thought like, oh, when the people escape Tartarus, he's gonna come out and then that's gonna get paid off. Doesn't seem like that's gonna happen. So okay, then I guess we can move on since we're already here. Let's move on. Oh, actually, I'll make one more small point, which is that it really sucks that in the current war arc, we actually did get what we probably could have gotten in this arc with Nejire. And I really liked all of her stuff of like the connection between like Suneater then to Mirio, of like that stream of connections. And it's like, man, if only that was in the Overhaul arc.
Yeah, like she definitely okay. Have you seen that like it's a Tumblr post and a Twitter thread, I think, online, of like ranking various Weekly Shonen Jump mangaka according to their misogyny? And there's an entry in Horikoshi, and it basically just says, I don't think he hates women, but he sure doesn't seem to think they're as valuable as men. And and Nejire is, to me, a prime example of that, because she's part of Big Three, and this is their arc, and she just vanishes halfway through. It's so like blatant.
Yeah, because I think he literally did say in an interview where he's like, by the end, I was just like really depressed with all the dark stuff I was writing, so I just kind of rushed it at the end, or at least like rushed certain sections. I don't know if that was like a fan rumor or whatever, but yeah, it's just really funny that you get to the war arc and you're like, oh hey, look, it's the lost Overhaul backstory.
Yeah.
So, but I guess we can then oh, did you have one final point on that?
No, I was just breathing.
I think that perfectly will lead into one of our first big discussions, which will be Mirio. So Mirio, yeah, go ahead. Did you have something to say?
I was just gonna say, yeah, Mirio. What a character.
What a guy.
What a guy.
Here's my first question. Do you think that Hori intended for Mirio to be popular? Because like the way he's treated after Gentle arc, or even just this arc, I mean the Gentle arc's a continuation, so after Gentle, the way he's treated after Gentle really makes it feel like he's some nobody.
Yeah.
Like, was it not intentional in his head for him to be like, because he's very integral to this whole like Nighteye and All Might and who's the true successor and all these types of things, and then he's just tossed to the side.
Well, I think Hori absolutely knew that he was going to be popular because of two things. A, he gets basically an entire chapter dedicated to saying how respectable and how cool he is. Yeah. Which you don't do that if you don't think he's going to be popular. And the other thing is, in the volume extras, he mentions that he wanted to introduce a Mirio-like character way earlier, and it's just the Overhaul arc was the first opportunity he got, really. So to me, that signals that he really wanted me to push Mirio into like the spotlight. And well, I don't fucking know what happened afterwards. You know, he just
got lost in the stream of conscious.
Yeah, he was just feeling a little goofy that day.
Yeah,
you know,
for that year.
Yeah, for that
years.
Oh God, yeah.
But yeah, I guess I could go over my thoughts on Mirio, and then we can see if you have any contrasting views.
Absolutely, go ahead.
So with Mirio, just as far as minor things, love his design, love his stupid face. I love the timer for his fight, where did he beat them in like 2 seconds? Because there's like parts where he's fighting and it's like in the points, like 0.365 or whatever. So
yeah, it's really fast.
which I think is fun. I love just like his power stances and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I love that there's a dramatic panel given to him picking up his pants.
Yes.
Like he's just very funny and very
Mhm.
likable, like very very quickly. Sorry ladies if you saw my willy. All that kind of stuff. Like he just comes across as very likable. Like it kind of is interesting that Hori was literally able to capture that lightning in a bottle of charisma that he gave to All Might, and then also give it
Mhm.
its own twist
Mhm.
with how Mirio kind of is, because he's just very likable. Um, and then I think what's good about the Suneater fight is that kind of part of it is like there's that little section where it is more focused on Deku and all these other characters. So he kind of uses Suneater as a way to give Mirio more context because
Mhm.
obviously Mirio is inspiring um Suneater, which I think would have probably tied into Nejire if she were around. This kind of idea of like Mirio really is this light. And so what is it going to feel like whenever we get to his fight? And what I think is the most compelling part about Mirio, and the which is the part where we see of his guilt, the fact that he let Eri go, and in his head he's
Mhm.
kind of been coping with it by the idea of like, well, it was kind of what needed to be done. But then I like that the
Mhm.
way Nemoto kind of gets it out of him is that it's instead it's like you wanted things to go smoothly, and it kind of paints it in the very uh basically like Mirio can cope and say like, well, it was for the greater good for her. But it kind of I like the flaw of it, which is that what Mirio actually kind of felt in that moment is that would screw up the mission. Like he actually wasn't
Mhm.
putting her first. Because when you go back to that scene, he really does kind of treat her not like maliciously, but he isn't like kind of panicking like Deku, or like when they get to or maybe not panicking, but you don't really feel the worry in his head when we go into his head. He's just like, Deku,
Mhm.
don't mess up the mission. And then when we get to Nighteye, we get to this idea of like he's not sitting there and thinking like, man, but I am really sad that we had to do that. He's just kind of doing the mission. And he only
Mhm.
really feels really bad whenever he finds out like she's being murdered and tortured every day. Um,
Mhm.
and so I really love that setup for his character in the fact of or in that fight, and how the idea is that what makes Mirio special then is that he's going to take that energy, take that weakness, and then he's like, "But I've always been weak. I've always known that my power is weak and that I'm weak, and so I'm going to keep fighting regardless." And so almost them bringing that flaw out in him emboldens him in the same way, like when you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, "I need to fix this about myself," or someone
Mhm.
says something. And so I like that it empowers him, and he just gets all these super cool shots of like Overhaul looking over to the back, and it's a white screen, like a white wall, and then he like kind of fades into the shot or whatever, and then he
Mhm.
yells at Overhaul so he'll dodge so he can kick through his mook.
Mhm.
Or the ways he'll use the cape to knock away the debris so he can't use it for spikes, or use it as all that kind of stuff. And so I like that the idea of Mirio is that he's presented as this perfect character, but then the idea is that his weakness really is that he didn't act like a hero in that moment, and that just that small thing, he's taking it upon himself and trying to fully redeem himself for this little girl, being like, okay, I'll be your hero right now. I won't make sure you ever have to go through that pain ever again. And that leads to one of the best moments, which is him jumping to protect her. And then instead of just taking the bullet being my favorite part, it's the part that he leans over, taps her on the head, and then she looks up and he's smiling. He looks really happy.
Mhm.
He's
Mhm.
he's totally willing to take it. And I think where the long term effects could have weakened it, for me, would have been if that were the end of it, and then Deku comes in and saves the day, and we're like, oh man, one day I hope Mirio gets his power back. And you're just waiting
Mhm.
for that. That's the end of his story. He sacrificed himself. So the payoff needs to be when he comes back, it's a big deal. But for me,
Mhm.
the reason it doesn't matter is because the whole point of his character is that he's kind of like an inverse of Deku, where Deku is completely worthless without his quirk, and sometimes very nearly worthless with his quirk, depending on how he uses it.
Uh,
Mirio is the character who loses everything, and what makes him even better is that he gets hit, gets up, fights regardless, and does a literally such a miraculous thing that we're not even allowed to see it, which I think makes it even cooler. Of the idea of like he fought for 5 minutes. This is the amount of time it took for this. He just kept going. And
mhm.
the part they cut from the anime, which is the reason it hits so hard, is where it goes, he fought, and then it goes, no, shot of him getting stabbed through the gut and the leg. He protected her.
Mm-hmm.
which is the solidification of what his story is, which is he is still Lemillion and he's solidifying himself in that way. And the way it pays
Mm-hmm.
off finally, and it's the thing they changed in the anime, is that in the anime, when Ares sees the cape, she thinks about it really hard. Like give her like internal monologue of like, should I go, should I not? And I think that's bad because in the manga, the way it works is her instant reflex is don't help me, don't save me, don't do anything. And Mirio's the one who's kind of taking her, and she's like begging him not to help her. And so the moment when she sees the cape, it says she grabbed it without thinking. And so that
Mm-hmm.
idea of seeing Mirio's cape made her feel like she wanted to be helped, like she wanted to feel warm and like that again. Then
Mm-hmm.
Deku wraps Mirio's cape around the two because he's the bridge between those two characters, ultimately leading to everyone being saved. So to me, what
Mm-hmm.
makes Mirio such a strong character and why I don't think he's been ruined as far as in this arc is that his whole journey is solidified and encapsulated and climaxed on in this one story of this character who has all this power, loses it, but that doesn't change the fact that they're a hero and they do everything they set out to do still. So when you get to the moment where it's like at the end and we find out that Ares' quirk can rewind people, that sets up a future thing of like, okay, when are we going to get to the cool part where the character is going to get their power back and they're going to kick ass and it's going to be like a great moment? And Hori
Mm-hmm.
completely flopped that. But to me, the reason that doesn't affect this story arc is because the thing that he went through got completed in this arc. And so to me, what makes Mirio worse afterwards is just that new setup, the new setup of like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, eventually we're going to get to a moment where we're going to get a badass Mirio return. And we're going to have nice little moments in between to build up to it. But that's its own separate thing. Whereas I feel like
Mm-hmm.
everything in the arc itself is very good and still hits. So that's my kind of defense for it.
All right. Well, I think that makes perfect sense. For me, it's just sort of yes, the overall arc and Mirio's presence within it kind of work in isolation if you don't think about the future. My problem is I cannot help but think about the future. Like
Mhm.
the moment when Mirio gets dequirked, basically,
Yeah.
phenomenal moment in both mediums. I actually like it in the anime as well. But I can just not stop thinking, wow, and it was undone in half a page. You know, like it's sort of like the simple fact that the current state of the manga exists makes it so that I cannot really go back and read this in complete isolation.
Mhm.
So it's like a weird dissonance thing because like I can sort of on paper I can agree that in isolation his arc still works really well because it's such a good and compelling story. He's such a likable character as well in this arc, removed from just a story. He cracks jokes. He's amicable with everyone. You know, he looks funny. He has everything that would make a cool character and a cool character arc. But practically, I cannot stop thinking about the fact that he pops out of the ground and says "PogChamp" in the war arc. You know, it's sort of like it's
So
sort of
to
like
oh yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say it's just that the war arc exists, and I cannot get over that.
Yeah.
Basically,
So I think so let me see if I understand this correctly. Because apologies if it came off that way. I was not intending to say that it if you only see it in a vacuum, it works. What I more meant to say was the story that is presented gets finished here. And so anything that builds off of it is a separate arc moving forward. And so it's like
hmm
it's still like long term, all that stuff is happening. But what I meant more to say is that when he gets hit, I'm not thinking of the like when he gets hit, I'm not thinking, oh man, what does this mean for when he eventually gets healed? I'm thinking, oh no, he's gonna die in this moment. But the fact is that he still fights and he still protects Eri, and Eri is the
hmm
conclusion that he's working for his own personal journey. So it seems like what maybe you're saying is that is it's that you have a bad memory attached to Mirio later, and that's still
yes,
Mirio. And so it retroactively just harms even just like seeing him. Whereas when
yes,
I enjoy stories, I kind of go through it, not understanding the future, but more of like whatever the story is we're telling now. If that gets concluded, I see that as like a stopping point in that character's journey, and then more is more is more. So like Deku, for example, Deku has been completely like lame to me since joint training, and I haven't been
Hmm.
enjoying him, but he's still my favorite character in the series because what I'm talking about is everything up till that is a complete story. Whereas I can't do that with All for One because when you recontextualize All for One's things, it literally infects the meaning of the moment where that character's doing things. Whereas I don't think the meaning of what Mirio's doing in that moment of taking the bullet and he could die in this moment, but he's going to keep fighting because he's a badass and he ends up saving the girl. And that has not been undone. Eri has not been, as far as we know, we've seen some people in UA, so who knows if this will happen again, but she has not been re-traumatized. She has been
Hmm.
saved. So that
Hmm.
is a completed story in a grander story, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's coming across properly.
No, no, like I think I get what you're saying, and I agree. Like that's the thing. Like on paper, I fully agree with that, and I wish I could read it like that. But my problem is just that I
To you, it's like Mirio. The Mirio scene later is not like the worst Mirio. It's that
it's
that's
the
still
same
connected
Mirio.
to this Mirio, and so
Exactly.
just seeing him doing anything brings up this horrible thing he's going to be doing later that sours your taste. It's kind of like how with Naruto, regardless
Hmm.
of anything you have to say about the war arc, you can still kind of love that whole section just because eventually you get to the point where Naruto and Sasuke are going to fight and that ended
Hmm.
beautifully. So it kind of like
Hmm.
takes all the negative stuff and just kind of like warps it into a singular memory of but when it's good, it's really good and you can kind of just forget about it. Whereas Mirio, it's a great moment and then he gets a really powerful bad moment.
Yeah,
And so it's like
basically.
they're constantly in conflict in your head of like, oh yeah, I like Mirio. This is why I like Mirio. This is a good story for Mirio. But I also hate Mirio because there's a separately terrible story for this character
Yes,
in
basically.
the same
Yeah.
story. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
and I think for me, just the bigger problem is that MHA, for a long time in which that I've been invested in it,
Mhm.
has been a story about making promises, about sort of building itself up.
Yeah.
And so I guess I've just sort of trained myself to look at MHA as a series of buildups and a
Yeah.
series of releases. And so to me, Mirio's story in Overhaul, while it works perfectly fine if you just look at it sort of within the context of that arc, I cannot stop thinking about what it led to because that's sort of what MHA has conditioned me to think about. You
Mhm.
know, especially if you think about plot points like Dobby, right, where every one of his character moments before the war arc is not really a Dobby moment; it's a "Ooh, what will Dobby do?"
Yeah.
moment. So it
Mhm.
really trains you to think like that. At least it did that to me.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I get you. Yeah, and I think I've been trained against that simply because, like, for example, Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Legend of
Hmm.
Korra is the sequel to that series. But in my head, I can easily just be like, nope, not canon. All the things you said
Okay.
about the previous characters and how they become deadbeat parents, not true, not real.
Oh, that's how I am with Boruto, actually.
Yeah, but I think it's easier in that case because you can like literally, I can walk over here and pick up the Avatar box set, and that is a physically different thing in my hand in a complete story than if I go over here and grab the Legend of Korra box set. Like, there's just
Hmm.
like there's a commercial break in between.
Yes, yes,
um,
absolutely. It's a
whereas, like,
separate thing.
yeah, whereas like Mirio is like an extension, and I guess for me with my hero, and I to be fair, I trained myself for this back in joint training when Blackwick came out, where I'm like, all
Hmm.
right, this is where I'm just gonna have to cut off parts of MHA as like, and then it got canceled. um, and I guess just for me, it's a lot easier to go like, let's say, I don't know, let's say Gentle comes back, which at this point I don't even want him to. I don't want him to be hurt by the story, but let's say he comes back and he gets like a bunch of really stupid decisions. But as long as those stupid decisions don't undermine his relationship to La Brava, then in my head, when I think of Gentle, I will just remember, oh yeah, Gentle. I love the story with Gentle where he did this with La Brava and they had their great dynamic. And that's how I am with Mirio and a lot of things here, where it's like it's not that I
Hmm.
forget everything else, it's that instead of cutting it off, it's like me just basically being like, oh yeah, Mirio. I love the story with Mirio where this happens, and everything else that isn't connected to that, that's just a different Mirio to me.
Okay. Well, maybe as the series goes on, I'll have to acquire that ability as well.
Yeah, but
Because
yeah, go ahead.
more and more stuff is getting thrown under the bus, so it's probably going to be healthier if I just learn to do that. You
Yeah,
know?
like with Shigaraki, his story ends. Well, I mean, all of MHA ends after Dobby's dance. It was unfortunate it got canceled,
Yeah, that's
but
true. Very
it,
unfortunate.
it was unfortunate. But yeah,
It
but
was
yeah. So mhm,
very brave for the manga to end in a dance number where everyone danced and sang about
and then
how this was
died.
all yes, and then died. Very brave of Hori to tell us about that horrible flesh-eating virus they all had through dance and song.
Yeah,
Like a very big moment. Sorry to spoil it for you guys.
yeah. It was very Sonic the Hedgehog. Nobody in your audience or you will get that. It was just for me. But
That's okay. That's all right.
one day I'll get you to read Archie Sonic. You will
Maybe.
learn. But okay, so I think
Maybe.
we can move on to yeah. But I think anyway, since we're just already talking about him, or talking about Mirio, we can move on to Eri. So Eri's another character, obviously, who eventually it's a similar thing with Mirio, where the promise is then like, okay, she's going to heal Mirio. But as
Hmm.
far as the thing in this arc that I think works really well for her, one, she's instantly very likable. They do it was a trick they brought up in like the Walking Dead game where they said,
Hmm.
we wanted to endear you to Clementine by basically not just having her be someone you're protecting, but you just have a small little moment where, and this is the first episode, so it's not a spoiler. Zombie's trying to grab you, and then she's just outside shaking, holding a hammer, like, here you go, here you go. And so you, as the audience, instantly like her because she helped you. And
Hmm.
so Eri gets a similar thing where she's in a situation where, and the way this is done is very clever, where most reactors, if you watch them, they'll be like, Deku, don't mess up the mission, you stupid idiot. Like they can detach
Hmm.
themselves basically. But then the moment that Eri, there's a really close shot of Eri on Deku, and it's kind of framed as if like you're looking down on her, and she like clutches him and goes, "Please don't go." Every reactor's like, "Well,
Oh.
well, I got." And so they do a really good job with that. And then what the Clementine moment, as I said, is she's like coming to them saying like, just basically almost please help me. She doesn't say that, but she's like, just don't go. Just let me like exist in not death state for a moment. But then the moment
Hmm.
Overhaul does try to hurt them, she goes back to protect them. And so that
Hmm.
immediately makes her, one, she's a proactive character.
Hmm.
And two, that makes you feel bad because you're like, oh, thank you, small child, for protecting me. I'll sleep
Hmm.
well tonight as you are being tortured.
Yeah.
um, she's very good. I just really like the idea of the way her suffering is presented with the way she kind of believes she's a curse on other people, and this kind of idea of like needing to show her that she wants to be saved. You have this really great moment where Deku comes back, and this is after he's been beaten up really badly by Overhaul, even after unlocking 20%. And
Hmm.
she's with Mirio, and Mirio's like, just stay here. Tons of people are coming to protect you, which in her head is like, tons of people are coming to die. That's great. So she goes back, and you just have this really nice moment where he uses Nemoto to make her say the truth. And it really hits hard because it's, do you think that this boy, Deku, can save you? And the truth is, no, I don't. I think he will die, which is really,
Hmm.
that's a pretty big, oh,
Yeah.
well, now I feel like shit. If
Uh-huh.
and so she makes the bargain, all that kind of stuff. And that's what makes the moment where she grabs the cape really special, because the whole journey of her character is that she is trying to protect all these people, but all these people are trying to protect her. So in order for her to get what she wants, which is for them to not die,
Hmm.
she has to let them help her. And by as the narrator says, she learned the need to be saved, and that activates her power, which then allows Deku to go 100%. And so you have this idea of Deku getting to 100% give himself to protecting someone, which is what he always wants to do, and then literally getting to meet someone who, because they are willing to allow him to do that, gives him infinite strength, basically. Um,
Hmm.
which is such a beautiful idea. And I love that it's it feels like a perfect version of like, because it's obviously a very big coincidence. I wouldn't say it's contrived, because the whole mystery is what is her quirk really.
Hmm.
So what it isn't really contrived, but it's a very big coincidence, but it feels like a very like lovely coincidence. Like it feels so
Yeah.
good that this is the way it works out, and that the only reason it works out that way is because characters make choices.
Yeah.
And so you get to that great moment where uh, Deku does probably the most badass thing he's ever done in the series, which is, oh, she's going to kill me. Not if I kill myself faster.
Yes.
It's just badass and amazing, and I love him. And you just get, yeah, I know a lot of people, some people think like, oh, I don't like that as soon as he got that, it was just an instant beatdown. But that's why it's good. The moment Eri was going to let people save her, it's over. Overhaul's done.
Hmm.
And the quirk that he tried to control completely destroys him. And I like that Deku doesn't even land the finishing blow. Overhaul gets up and tries to grab her, and then her quirk disintegrates it and gets rid of him, basically.
Hmm.
So overall, that's just I think what makes Aries' character so likable and so enjoyable, and just kind of what makes her so just an endearing character. And I think people kind of get too hung up on the idea of just like her being the character to be rescued. They might be frustrated when she wants to go back or whatever.
Hmm.
But no, I think it's a really interesting way to take the victim character in a heroic situation and kind of showing this idea of the way the victims can be heroes themselves by allowing people to help them. And I just think all that's
Hmm.
beautiful and great. So
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a really good sort of summation of what makes her cool. For me, one thing that I've always appreciated, and you've touched upon it quite a bit, is the fact that the big stakes of this arc isn't saving Eri as much as it is convincing her that she can be saved, right?
Mhm.
That it's not about just rushing in there and dragging her out the castle, but it's about making her understand that she is not lost, that it's not hopeless. Um, and the reason I like this is because a lot of Overhaul centers on reframing typical heroic narratives. So, for example, when Deku first encounters Eri and they let her go, he says, "Oh, we will do our best to go save her. We have to do it." And Nighteye tells him, "Don't be so arrogant. You don't get to decide who you save and when. You need to be very conscious about this." And that's sort of the first hint of that we see, sort of this idea of, no, we are literally not All Might anymore. We cannot just do these things. We need to get a warrant, get the police going. We need to go and investigate. And then we have to save this girl, not by physically dragging her out of danger, but by making her accept that she can even be saved. And I think it's again goes into this territory of MHA taking its really simplistic origins and twisting them a little bit into something that is still as sincere, as like optimistic as much of the series has been, but in a different way, in a way that gives it sort of more nuance and more perspective. And yeah, I've just always appreciated that. And the overall arc does a lot of that. Again, I mentioned it before, just the fact they need to actually work on getting like the ability to even raid Overhaul's hideout, that it's not just a we smash the door down kind of situation. So yeah, in that sense, I really like Aries' position in the story. I think people are way too mean about her. People basically condense her down to the Dragon Balls of the story, that she
Yeah.
can just undo anything bad, when she's so much more than that. She's a likable character. She is someone who, like, she is kind of a damsel in distress at some points, but she's so effortlessly likable that it doesn't come across as annoying,
Well, and
right? She's
also
just a kid.
it's like a weird negative proactivity where again she's allowing herself to stay there in certain
Hmm.
senses. So it's kind of like and of course, damsel in distress is a trope as any other, so you can do it well, and I think she's done well in that case.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Oh, sorry. Did you have more to say?
No, no,
Um,
that was pretty much it for me.
yeah, and I think as far as long term, I think especially with Mirio, at the very least, you can kind of just throw in any of the negativity you might feel towards this character onto him because he is the
Hmm.
climax of it. So it's a lot. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, because you didn't even immediately go into it. So I was like, I feel like it's probably a lot easier to just be like, her character's fine. It's just dumb that we didn't get to see Mirio actually talk to her because she doesn't come back in a crazy way. Mirio is
Hmm.
the face of her failed eventual, that failed story. So I think it
Hmm.
hits less like if we're going by the idea of like there's more moments with Mirio in my head that are terrible that it makes the moment where he was really good like almost it's just wonky and now I can't help but think of it. But I feel like with Eri, it's a lot easier to just toss that onto the Mirio story because he's the face of it. So I think
Hmm.
she comes out of it a lot easier. Like I don't know if you felt much dissonance while they were trying to save her as you did with Mirio.
No, not at all, honestly. I think it really helps, again, that Mirio is the face of that failed plotline, as you said. Um, Eri, obviously, her character arc does get sacrificed for the cliffhanger and the war arc, but it's less egregious to me just because for me, her character is something that you can sort of come back to continuously and be about, her overcoming a trauma, her like moving forward. Her character arc for me doesn't have like a specific end point.
Yeah.
Like saving Mirio kind of is that. But if they like continue to just give us scenes of her doing normal girly stuff, I'm fine. Like not much has been ruined. Whereas, for example, Mirio's post-overhaul story has literally hinged on the fact when will he get his powers back. And so it's, as you said, it's easy to take any frustration I have with that moment and load it onto Mirio because his example is much more egregious and ruins his character much more than it does for Eri, basically.
All right. Well, as long as you can still like Eri, we can be friends. So we're
yes,
good.
Absolutely. Good. Good.
By the way, or no, I forgot. Anyway, we're gonna move on to let's see. Let's just do Overhaul then. So we got Overhaul. I think now, especially with unfortunately the way Shigaraki has gone, I think Overhaul might be the best villain in the series to me. He has the design. He has, or sorry, did you say yeah or?
I said that sound signified I don't want to agree, but I can't argue too well against it, basically.
Okay, yeah, so we'll go through it. So, one, his design is dope. Two, he a lot of the I think he's like the best version of Horikoshi's subtlety in a good and bad way, because as my video talks about, a lot of the things that people complain about him by the end, which is that like by the end he just comes with this raving sociopath crazy man who can't think straight, was all literally set up in his opening scene where he comes in and he's all like, well, Yakuza, baby, look at my cool gloves, I'll murder you. But then as soon as he gets touched, he's like, and he's like rubbing himself and he gets all the hives, and then and then Shigaraki rushes him and he's not like, come at me, Shigaraki, I'm gonna fight you. He's like, guard, please. And then someone dies and you could see the fear on his face and he's like, this is dumb. And so like I really like that they immediately but I think people just get really caught up in, he murdered someone and they exploded, he looks cool, and then also just like I think they just look at his expressions of like craziness of just like, yeah, he's really mad, like he's taking it seriously, but no, he's like rubbing himself like and so like that's what I think what makes Overhaul so fun is just the duality of he wants to, he really cares about his boss. That's where it all starts or whatever. But he's a sociopath. He grew up on the streets. When we see him, he's got like this deadpan expression. He was raised on propaganda that says like, quirks are a disease and all this kind of stuff. We see him, he's not playing with children, so he's antisocial. And he literally has a quirk that negates consequences. And so that's why it feels really cool where you have the contrast of like, the way he looks before, where he kind of has a normal outfit, he doesn't wear gloves, he doesn't have any of that stuff, and he's like, no, we have to move with the times to get back what we want, which is we have to become a villain group. So he takes on a cool mask, he takes on the outfit or whatever, and he puts his boss into the coma because he's like, but I can just bring him back, so there's no problem, there's no issue here. Same with Eri, and also he believes she's a curse, all that kind of stuff. And so I just think like that contrast of like how cruel he is, but not like justifying it in the sense of like, oh, but he really likes his dad, because he's still awful to them. And so you can't even justify it in the sense of like, like you have the evil sociopath, but they love their wife, and so you're like, oh, I'm conflicted. It's like, no, his love for his dad or whatever is to like put him in a coma and almost kill him.
Yeah.
And so even that takes on like, it's very clearly twisted. And also the dad constantly is like, please don't do bad things, and he's like, but we gotta. And so and so like you take all that stuff. And so I just think that one, his power is dope. They do a lot of cool stuff. I love his forearmed form. I love his fight with the way he manipulates the ground. He creates all these cool spikes, and I just love the way all of the bullets are an embodiment of how he views the boss, which is that he's like, oh, the boss took me in, so I owe him my life, so I owe him a debt, so I will work super hard to owe him. Rappa was beaten in a fight, so he feels like he's indebted. The trash villains were saved off the street, so they feel like their life can only go towards helping them. And then Nemoto was given a purpose, and so they will fulfill that purpose even to their own detriment. And so all of the bullets end up embodying that kind of cycle in a really cool way, and kind of show how twisted he is, how he's perpetuating this kind of sociopathy or whatever. And it just makes him really cool. You have the idea of like him getting rid of the name Chizaki so he can become Overhaul. He's like, don't call me that. I like that his kind of plan is basically just to, because originally it's like get rid of quirks, but he wants to not necessarily to have the power to get rid of quirks, to be the guy who can do it, so that the heroes will sacrifice themselves and give them money and do all these things so that they can come out. So he basically just creates like a little bubble that he controls of the giving and taking of quirks so that the Yakuza can rule. And so it's just really, really cool how it all ties back to that heart. But then he has the grandiosity of like, I'm saving the world, and like here being a hero is a sickness. You're just a schoolboy. You think you're special. No. But then he's also perpetuating the same thing because he's immune to it because it's for someone else. So there's just a lot going on with him. And so for his ultimate downfall to come at the person he hurt, for him to get a power of love moment where he's on the ground and he's in agony and he's got all these bubbles and stuff on him, which, mind you, it's really cool that he hates violence. He hates getting his body dirty and all that stuff. He literally breaks down to hives, but he's doing it for the boss, so that creates more dynamic. But he's on the ground, he's in agony and all that stuff, and he remembers the boss being like, you shouldn't have beaten up all those people, but thank you for doing it, small child. And he's like, and I'm still a small child. He said thank you. That's all that matters. Ah! And yes. So it's so great that his ultimate conclusion is that he loses the power to revive his boss, and he is literally laying worthless in a bed just like him. And that is what ultimately leads to him realizing like, oh, I'm ruined. Uh-oh. So to me, his pathetic display later on in the series is just more of like, yeah, that's what I expected. He's pathetic and a loser. What would have ruined him for me is if he was like, I need to get my powers back so I can be back on top and be a cool villain. Instead, he's just like, Dad, where are you? Bash, bash, bash. And then Deku comes down and is like, hey, so you're still a sociopath, right? He's like, can I see my dad, Deku? And he's like, no. Oh. And I'm like, yeah, duh, idiot. So I think he's great. I think he's pretty perfect. So that's my rant on Overhaul.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you've said here. Like his display in the villain hunt arc, it still bothers me, but it doesn't like retroactively make him worse, because Overhaul really feels like he was just done after his arc.
Yeah.
And the stuff in Villain Hunt honestly doesn't even bother me based on like his character. It bothers me simply because does Hori think we're fucking stupid? Like you take one of your main villains and break him out of jail, and then you do nothing with him, and you're like, oh yeah, why did you expect anything to happen? Like, come on.
Yeah, so that's more of like a knock on the face of it is Villain Hunt.
yeah. But no, I really like Overhaul. I think it's really cool that while he does try to like move away from being a Yakuza and being more sort of a villain organization, you can still tell he's distinctively different from the villains we've seen. When he's putting on like his Yakuza personality, he's very he's almost polite, but also sort of direct. Like he has manners, but he will also tell you, get out of my way or I'll kill you. And it makes for just a more interesting presence in the story. Like I'm always fascinated by the scene where he meets Deku for the first time in the alleyway, where he's a completely functional human being.
Yeah.
A little creepy, right? But he doesn't seem like anything super dangerous until, he turns on the bloodlust. And I just like the whole plot line where it's like, we know he's a Yakuza, but we don't have proof. We cannot actually like arrest him for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also like sort of the little snippets we get of his childhood, which is a huge shame that the anime cut that, where he's, reading up on like the disease that quirks are. And I love his design. Plague Doctor masks are an easy 10 out of 10 in character design.
Like the
Like
purple and green out, like winter jacket.
yes, and like reading like his sections in the manga while listening to his theme from the anime, just fucking phenomenal. Too bad it was never used properly, but oh well,
Whatever.
whatever. Um, but yeah, no, I really do like Overhaul. I like how he's kind of a proto Shigaraki for Deku to overcome because he also kind of has decay, but just a better version of it
Just has
at
the
the
better
at that
version of
point.
Decay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's like a trial run for Deku, kind of like how Redestro is a trial run for Shigaraki, because he's also a guy who gets super strong in increments of percentages.
Yeah.
Obviously, my Villain Academia is going to be a different story altogether because,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah, no, I really do like Overhaul. I think he is definitely one of the strongest villains in the series in terms of just a complete package. I still prefer Shigaraki up until the point from which point I don't.
Mhm.
Um,
So
and I also
he's a character who has enough good moments that they haven't yet overridden all the bullshit.
the thing is, if he just comes back in the manga,
Yeah.
I will be fine because then I can just be like, he was in his flop phase for 2 years.
Well, it
It's
literally what works for Shiggy is that he's just literally not been here. So like
yeah.
he can't be screwed up as a person, if that makes sense. He's literally
Mhm.
not been here.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah. No, I
But
agree.
yeah, those are my thoughts on Overhaul mostly.
Cool. There's that. So okay, we're coming to a close here. We'll finish up on Deku, but I just have a few smaller things. So Nighteye, I think Nighteye is and we can tie this into changing the future. So I really just really like Nighteye. I think he's a great little story arc here. He
Mhm.
dies. Whoa,
Whoa.
he should be really pissed that he wasn't taken to the magic hospital. That can
Yes.
like
The
yeah, like seriously, what were they thinking? They did him they wanted him to die. There's no other option. So
Mhm.
that hospital can literally put you in a death-like state and can heal you after being punched so hard that the earth shatters beneath your body. So like and you being like 100 years old. So he should be
Uh-huh.
really upset.
Well, he read the script and he saw that he needed to die, and he was like, "Okay, get me to the shitty hospital."
Fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um but no, Night Eye's really cool. I really love his whole I like the idea of his quirk and how it manipulates and hurts him by basically creating this idea of like, well, I've never been wrong before, so it must mean that I'm never wrong, which creates the self-fulfilling prophecy of everything he does do happens. And I really like
Mhm.
that they talk about um he kind of contradicts himself in the fight before he comes to his realization where he's like, sometimes I would try to go off the beaten path, but then I would look and it would stitch itself back together. So it's like that presents the idea of, okay, well, what if you kept going in that direction, but instead you looked and then it basically it's like okay, so new scenes can be added, things
Mhm.
can change or can be added or whatever, but they always come back. And I really like, and they cut this from the anime. I don't understand, but they have the moment where he's laying there and he said, because they do the part where he talks about like belief and like wanting to create a future then allowed them to defeat Overall. Cool. But the thing that
Mhm.
ties it all together is the fact that he thinks back and he's like, every time I would look in the future, in the back of my mind, I would always be thinking, but that's not going to work or it can't be changed. And so
Mhm.
it adds to the idea of no, it really is the mindset of like that deterministic view, which ties into his whole thing about like, it has to be Mirio. It needs to be this. I need to protect All Might. I need to do all these things. I need to control things. And so that kind of controlling nature of him is what made it to where he couldn't see something else. And I love that in the
Mhm.
Overhaul fight, he's down there and he's like, Deku's going to die. That's just how it is. But then he thinks to what Deku says about, smashing a future or whatever and doing what you can. And he goes, but take me up there anyway. I need to see.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why it's so great when he sees Deku and he's like, you made my dream come true too. Meaning that he also during that fight was willing to believe it could happen.
Mhm.
And that's really cool. It's really dope. Because the whole, people where they I think get hung up is we're told, okay, fate is set. And then they go, okay, so that's it. And so when things come in that say, oh, fate is bullshit, they're like, you're bullshit. I believe fate was real. That's a cop out. It's like, no, the point is that it's a twist on the power. No, that's a cop. And I think it's always weird because the All Might scene, the whole point of it was that he was like, I believed when I was fighting All for One that that was where I was going to die, but I thought of you, and so I decided to fight against that fate. And so he's like, maybe I already changed the future. And the point of the ending is to then say, yeah, that you can do that. I don't know where you stand on this, but ever since that moment, I've always been someone who said All Might's not going to die. You don't have an arc where you set up the idea of I'm going to die, Deku. It's inevitable I'm going to die. I'm just definitely going to die. And then the end result is, oh, you can change the future. Things aren't set in stone. And then consistently have characters like Aizawa be like, All Might, you should live. You don't have to be suicidal and think you're worthless. Stain comes up to him. You should live. You have a lot of things you can do in this world. Don't just give up. And then everyone looks at those and is like, those are death flags, obviously. Unless MHA is like a dark series that's gonna just be cruel, why would you ever think that? That's not, what do you think this is? So if All Might does die, I've always said it's probably going to be past the time he was supposed to, which he might even be past that time anyway, given how much time's passed. But yeah, that's what I really love about the future thing, and just that I think that's just a lovely message, which is fuck fate. It's not real. Fight and do what you need to do, and you get that beautiful scene with Deku and All Might where he's like, "You changed me," and he turns into his big moment. This is a great moment, great stuff for Nighteye, great. So I think that whole through line and message of the arc is really good, and I think Nighteye is a standout character. I don't remember him every time I think of MHA, but when I do think of him, I'm like, man, that was good.
Yeah, he got out before it got bad.
Yeah. So what do you think?
Well, I think regarding All Might, because you asked me that, I used to think he needed to die not because of the prophecy, but simply because I needed Shigaraki to kill him, because I always want more cool moments for Shigaraki. And it would have kind of been a very important and big moment for him. Yeah. But especially now where we are in the story, I don't think there's any time for like a tragic All Might scene.
Especially since we killed Bakugo.
Yes, especially since we killed Bakugo, supposedly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's gonna die anymore. I do like that the overall arc takes such a strong stance on, fighting fate. I like the idea that Night-Eye's quirk was actually really shitty because it didn't actually show him anything useful except the things that like he gaslit himself into thinking were absolute truths and then turned into absolute truths because of that. And I like that idea. I like this because it's sort of an inversion of Mirio. Because with Mirio, you think it's this super weak quirk when you read the description of it, but it's actually incredibly powerful due to it being his quirk, due to him having trained it and him having all this experience. And you get Nighteye, whose quirk sounds incredibly powerful on paper, but the more you learn about its limitations, you realize, wow, this quirk did nothing but cause you pain. So I've always appreciated sort of that duality to it. Nighteye is all right. Like, I think he's a fine character. I wouldn't place him anywhere in like my high rankings. But he's good for what he does. He's memorable. He has maybe the worst haircut in the series.
That's why All Might left. He couldn't. The fashion sense just wasn't good for branding.
Yes. And yeah, no, I just like also the fact that he's not just a stoic businessman character, that he genuinely is a goofy dude who collects All Might toys and wants people to laugh and tell jokes.
Yeah, he's about people being happy, which I think is a nice, admirable thing.
Yeah, if anything, I'm a little sad it doesn't come through as much throughout the fight part of the arc.
Yeah,
you don't get to see that much anymore. Pretty much honestly, past his introduction scene, it's very, very low key after that, which is a shame.
Yeah, and then he gets a nice little death. I like the idea of him smiling while he's dying and all that stuff. So. It's an actual like good tragedy that gives the arc weight. Whoa, crazy. When you set up a thing where it's like, whoa, that person's definitely dead, and you kill them. Whoa, it like makes the arc feel like it mattered.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty great.
Mhm.
So yeah, no, I really like that. And then okay, I think that leads me to the final character, which is Deku. So I think this is where, for me, Deku's character, like it's fully, well, this along with Gentle, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Mhm.
The idea of Deku's character that I never was able to kind of fully understand, like never really put into words. I've put into words in different ways, but I think I finally understand that the reason I love Deku is that he sucks. Is that he is the idea is that he is so, in practical sense, bad at like being a hero in terms of like he's not very charismatic, he's not good at fighting, he's
Mhm.
not, which are very important things, and those are the things that are contrasted with Mirio. Um, but the idea of the series is that it's about growing, it's about going to school, you know. And
Mhm.
so what I love about Deku in this arc is that he gives himself a. He starts off and he goes, "Here's my goal." Because Mirio asks, and he goes, "I want to make sure I always win. I want to make sure that I save everybody, and I want to make sure that nobody worries about me." And by the end
Uh-huh.
of it, he loses every single fight, including the one against 100% Shigaraki or Overhaul, because he can't handle the energy anymore. So Eri saves him. He makes everybody worry, and Nighteye dies. So and so what I love about it is that, so you have all that, and then you have contrast with Mirio, who does a lot of really amazing things. Is literally the reason Eri allows herself to be saved. Because again, to her, when she saw Deku, she thought,
Mhm.
he will not save me. And literally, the reason she went to him was not because he was going to help her, but because this stupid child is going to die if I don't do something. So I have to.
Mhm.
But the only thing that gave her that motivation was Mirio's cape. That's the reason it's so important that she just grabs it. And so Mirio is a light, is inspiring people, is saving people. And Deku, meanwhile, has to get carried by his teacher, who protects him at every chance, and a toddler. Um, so with Deku, and then also you have the thing with him in the test. I love that he has to get the stamp, and he completely fails. But the idea of it isn't like, oh, you impressed me, so I'm going to let you join regardless because of this unique thing. It was just basically, oh, that is impressive, but I was always going to let you join because I still think you suck, and I want you to see how badly you suck, so you'll give up and give the quirk back. Idiot,
Uh-huh.
sign the paper. So like, and that's a thing that was always really frustrating when I watch reaction channels. When people would be like, he'd be like, I accept you, and they'd be like, ugh, ugh, of course, ugh, and then like they would just completely ugh their way through the part where he's like, anyway, I don't think you're cool at all. You suck, and I hope you give up. And they're like, ugh, he
Mhm.
accepts him. So, but that's the thing about Deku, that so what does all that lead to then? So he sucks the whole arc. But the point that's emphasized in that scene, and then also in the scene with Mirio, is that, but you were chosen, so deal with it. It's the idea of like, but All Might, because Night Eye's like, I can't believe it went to you. And
Mhm.
he's like, well, the reason is, it's like, how could you be a hero? And he goes, he said I could. And he's like, who said you could? He's like, All Might said I could be the greatest hero. And that's the point. It's that Deku does suck, and this has always been a thing. Even when he first goes to save Bakugo, he literally says like, "I probably made it worse." Like I
Mhm.
was the reason you dropped the slime monster. I ran in and could have gotten other people killed. They bring that up to him. But All
Mhm.
Might's whole thing is like, no, but your heart was in the right place, and so I'm going to make it to where you can be a competent hero because you have
Mhm.
everything you need
Mhm.
except being good at it. And so that's what makes Overhaul so great, is that Deku tries to step out and be so great. And the thing that gets him through is just the fact that his heart is in the right place and that he refuses to give up. But he still almost got people killed. He still would have lost to Overhaul and been killed by Ares Quirk because he couldn't deal with
Mhm.
that. He still got Aizawa hurt in the first place, and he says all these things. He says all these things to Mirio. He says, "I had to be saved by Eri. I had to be saved by Aizawa. Didn't do a good job." And then
Mhm.
Mirio's thing is, but that would be sucky for you. So it's yours. You have to keep it. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the resolution, is just, we'll deal with it, Deku. You were chosen. So just get better. You will grow. And I like that. And what I love about that is that we'll come into the Gentle arc. But just a little spoiler for that. What makes that arc so great is that Gentle re-asks the question to Deku, and he says, why did you want to be a hero? And he says, people XYZ. And then he goes, so I want to be a hero who can show them a bright future. And in that case, it's allowing Eri to go to a concert and to beat a like D level villain. And that's his first full victory in the whole series without any help, besides like winning the race. For the only fight, it's the only fight in the series up to that point that he just wins, and it's against like a rodeo clown. So, but that's why it hits so hard, because he is getting better. He just has to get better. And so I think that's what makes Deku so great, is that the moments that really mattered, though, and it's my favorite moment in the entire series, is the moment where after all that pain has been going to his body, and Aizawa turns off Eri's power, they go to fall, and then she's going to fall to the side. She's going to hit her head on concrete, and Deku has just enough strength to go, ooh, catch her head, make sure it doesn't hit the ground. And it's like, that's Deku. That's the reason that he's so good, and that's what makes him so lovable. And I love the scene where it's Eri in her room, and she's like, no one had ever touched me like that before. His hands were so kind. And they show him pulling down the hand that's all scarred. So it's like, yes, the hand that is scarred and bloodied and looks scary and is beaten and that he uses to beat up villains, that is the hand that she thought felt kind. Because that's Deku. So that's why I think he's so great. Obviously, this is his lower point, because he's going to come out of it on the other side in the gentle arc. But I think that's what makes this arc so enjoyable. And I think for some people, you obviously want Deku to grow a lot faster. I love that he gets 20% and then he immediately loses. He's like, all right, this is like close enough to what I can do. Let's go. And it's like, yeah, power up, baby. And then he just like, he literally does a flip, and then Overhaul's like, dude, you telegraphed like a million miles away you're going to do a flip. Die now. And he's like, no. And that's where the gentle art comes in with the dancing, and it's great and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, overall, that's what I think makes Deku so enjoyable. It's the way he talks to Eri, the way he cares about her, and it's just the fact of like, yeah, this is a type of hero you would want. This is someone who could be the greatest hero. He just has to get there. He just has to get better. And the final conclusion of the idea of, again, if she's gonna kill me, not if I kill myself faster, badass. And then also just the way in which that is so beautiful, in the fact of, oh, now he can do something like he was going to do for Koda. He can fight a monster and 100% attack every single thing, because this other person is here to help me, which is how Deku has gotten so far as he has in the first place. Aizawa ends up protecting him by turning off Eri's quirk, all these different things. And so, yeah, Deku's 10 out of 10. I love him. He's a good boy. And I think he's still the best part of the arc. I love the way he's drawn. I love the way he's animated. I love that we actually get to use his souls, where he's like breaking walls and stuff, like things he couldn't do without them, which is very handy. He does a lot of good tag team combo things with like Aizawa, where they fight the rock guy. He doesn't get to see boobs, so he's still a pure boy. It's great. He's great. And I love Deku. Peak fiction. Yes. So there you go. That's my rant on Deku.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with most of what you said. Like, I mean, you are the Overhaul guy, so you've touched on things also that I hadn't thought of. One thing I like in general about Deku this arc is also just the segment when he's depressed in school. Yeah. Because I think before this point, we haven't really gotten like quiet devastation and quiet sadness before. We've always gotten sort of the anime sadness of, oh no, I'm crying, or oh no, I'm devastated. But having Deku like fall behind in his studies and be distracted because he's just so depressed, first about All Might and then about Eri, really just lends depth to the character, because it humanizes him. It makes him feel less like an anime character, more like a person who has just, discovered a couple of fairly traumatic things. So I've always really appreciated that, as well as, the scene Heroes Don't Cry, where, his friends are basically just shut up, cry, and then eat my food, which I always thought was very sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that moment.
Yeah, and I also like, as you said, that, we get to see his souls, that he works together with Kirishima. It's not a dynamic we get super often, so I'm always happy when we do. Actually, fun fact about Kirishima's special move, the red gun turret. I don't know if you know this, but that name is actually very controversial.
Really?
Yes, because the Japanese is a anglicized utterance that essentially goes as red gun toretto, which you could translate or romanize as red gun turret or red gauntlet.
Oh yeah,
Because
I've heard of this. Yeah.
yeah, and so both the official translation and the fan translations have switched between all of them, between both of these versions, multiple times. In fact, I'm pretty sure in the weekly translated version, still on like the old Shonen Jump English website, I'm pretty sure that one was Red Gauntlet.
Yeah. I remember seeing
Until
that
it,
somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, until they settled on Red Gun Turret. And it's always funny. I always thought that was kind of endearing that it's like, what are you trying to say, Hori? Because it's literally the same word, basically, based on Japanese phonetics. So, yeah, that's just sort of an aside. But talking about Deku, I like his presence in the arc. Um, I like the way we get to see him sort of from the eyes of Eri as well. As like, I don't know who you are. I don't think you can save me, but your hands feel very kind and there has to be something there. And as you said, I like how that sort of blossoms into her allowing herself to be saved once, all the pieces are in place and she sees that cape when she's flying through the air, basically.
No, absolutely. I agree. Sorry, did you have anything else to add to that? Because I have two more things to add to Deku, and then we'll be done. So
Yeah, I have nothing else. I'm all overhauled out, basically.
okay, sorry. So yeah, so last two things to add to your Heroes Don't Cry thing. I think that's really important, just simply because the person, like, I think we always obviously think of the fandom being like Deku's a big crybaby, and so I think that might translate to people thinking that everyone says this, but that's not true. The only character in the series who ever gets onto him about crying is All Might. All Might's the one who calls him a big baby for it and says like you shouldn't do this. So I actually think it's very like good boy points for Mirio and especially Todoroki, where they're actually combating a very actually kind of bad mindset that All Might, whether he meant to or not intentionally, put into Deku's head. Because when he says heroes don't cry, that's why he's saying it. Because All Might has told him, you stop crying, you don't need to cry. And so for when Todoroki, it's one of my favorite moments for him, where he says, well, I think real heroes cry when they need to, which hits extra hard because you know that he sees Deku as his hero. And so he's also, it's like, well, I know heroes can cry because you do, and you're my hero. So there's a lot of extra nuance to that little scene, whether intentional or not by Hori, that I just think are cool. And I really like that idea of like, heroes don't cry, because All Might says that. It's like, no, that's not true at all. It's like, oh, thank you. I will take your soba. And then finally, it's a scene I completely missed, but it's where Deku is there. Eri comes back. She says, you can't help me. And it's probably, I think, the biggest encapsulation of this arc and what Deku is just overall, which is it's the moment where, because he's been stabbed in the legs, he's been stabbed in the arm, so he's not very useful here. He just got punked out of 20%, and he's just kind of there on the ground, and Eri has come back and said, you suck, I'm going home to being tortured. So, and so you get this great moment where Overhaul is like, you think you're helping her, but you trying is really just a burden on Eri. You're hurting her. And then he goes, she does not want you. And it's like this really nice full page spread. Or it's like in the middle or whatever. And what I really love about that is then we go to Night-Eye's head, and he's like, Deku, you can't win because of the future. And then we go to Deku's head, and he's thinking of when Night-Eye said Mirio deserved it. So it's also adding this weight of like, if Mirio were doing this, he would be winning, and I'm a failure. And then obviously Night-Eye saying he's a failure. And I like that the moment that always makes me cry every time I read it is that he doesn't say like, okay, but I'm gonna fight anyway because like I can do this. He goes, and again, he's also thinking of the fact that Eri does not want him to help her. And he goes, so what? Which is a so what to everything that we've just read. And then he goes, that doesn't matter because you were crying. You are crying. And so I am going to help you. And I think that's just the beautiful heart of Deku and what makes his character just so good, of like this idea of like, Mirio should have gotten it. The future's set in stone. She literally does not want my help because I'm so pathetic, but that doesn't matter. You are crying, so I'm going to help you. And that's great. Deku's great. Love him. So, but yeah, so that's Overhaul arc. Final thoughts on that for me. but just be that it's my favorite arc in the series, especially when combined with Gentle. I kind of combine them together because of
Hmm.
what I mentioned about Deku's characterization. But on its own, I think it is probably a 9 out of 10 for me. It's highs
Hmm.
as far as Deku having Deku stuff, Ares stuff, and then also just Overhaul being a wonderful threat combined with all the awesomeness that is just constantly happening.
Hmm.
And the way it kind of poetically ties together with Nighteye, it's super strong. I can totally understand your thing with Mirio just because of how horribly he's been butchered.
Hmm.
But I think even his stuff really, even if some of his stuff were to bother me, it would tie too much. It would add too much to Ares' story and Deku's story and Overhaul for it to really detract too much for me. So while I do think that Shigaraki has just been unequivocally weakened, and it's why I can't give this arc a 10, um,
Hmm.
I would definitely still give it a 9. So it's a 9 out of 10
Okay.
for me. Combined with Gentle, I think it's a 10. Like if we combine this
Hmm.
with like the Airy, save Airy plot, then it's too good. But
Hmm.
and then all the flaws are just kind of, I'll brush them aside. But as its own arc, I think it's a 9. So
All right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would give it a 9. I think I'm hovering around like an 8, 7.5 for myself personally,
uh-huh.
just because, um, as I said, I cannot really detach myself from what the elements of this arc eventually turn into. You got Mirio.
Yep.
I also, am not a huge fan of the fact that the quirk bullets and like trigger the
Oh
drug
yeah.
get introduced, and it's sort of like, okay, nothing happens anymore. Um, but those things aside, the arc by itself is really strong. I think it's something that the series really needed at the time, because it's really the series' first classic shonen arc, I would say. And by classic, I mean, a big event with multiple fights happening, with, a simple goal that complicates itself continuously and that has characters, getting stronger and getting beat down and beating other people's down. It feels like this is My Hero fully embracing the battle shonen formula more so than it ever has before. And I think the series' tone and themes benefit from it. And for that, I really like it. I really enjoy Overhaul. I enjoy Shigaraki for what he is in the moment, which I can't do for Mirio. And I think Infinite 100%, especially in the anime, is phenomenal. Like one of my favorite moments in the series for sure. So yeah, 7.5, 8 out of 10, something like that from me.
Heck yeah. Well, okay, so then that brings that's a mystery to solve then. Is like, okay, what will be Ocean's favorite MHA arc? Because I don't think we've went through an arc so far in the series where like this is my favorite. And I know the arc that was previously your favorite, we are looking at a huge asterisk next to potentially.
Yes,
So
yes.
I think that's my most excited part is I know it would either be My Villain Academia, Pro Hero, or Culture Festival. That's what I always
Hmm.
thought would be your favorites. So I'm interested to see how Culture Festival holds up. I'm definitely interested to see how Pro Hero holds up, and then especially My Villain Academia.
Yeah, especially the big one. Um, yeah, I mean, if I can like make a prophecy and maybe I'll get struck down for it. But I do think that Culture Fest and Pro Hero probably have held up really well because they really don't interact much with the future. Pro Hero more so than Culture Fest. But even then, its setup is mostly just vague. Oh, Hawks is in the story and whatnot, which I think is going to be easier to swallow in retrospect, considering what the series is now. My Villain Academia is a very different beast, so we will
Yeah,
just have to see.
that one's just gonna be both of us going, "Ow! Why does it still hurt? Ah!
Yeah, like, ow, Hori, why did you do this?
Ow! No, I'm still reading."
Yeah.
But
Um,
yeah, dude. No, those are my thoughts, and thank you once again for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, I was very happy to have you here, especially for the overall arc, your baby.
Indeed.
Um, and I was very, 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 very glad to hear your thoughts. It was very interesting. You touched on a lot of things I hadn't ever thought about. So you go, my guy.
Well, thank you.
Um, Thank you for being here. And folks, definitely check out Ian and his channel. I hope you care about Kingdom Hearts, which you should. Apparently, the games are good.
Yeah. They have
Um,
Sephiroth and Donald Duck in. What's the problem?
that is true. Those are two of the most powerful characters in fiction, after all.
And they talk to each other, which is even better. So but yeah, guys, that's my channel, and that's yeah, you can find me there. That video is supposed to come out by the end of the year, so definitely look forward to it. And then, of course, if after this you're in hankering for MHA, I have videos on Overhaul and Airy, where I kind of go into more depth on a few of these things, as far as like Airy and Culture Festival, and then Overhaul, touching upon a few more nuances. So I would still recommend those. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. In that case, folks, stay safe, and we will see you next time for Culture Festival.
All right. Take care, guys. Oh, wait. No. And plus babysitting.
Oh, plus babysitting. Yes, we can't forget about that. See you for babysitting class, guys.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.